Good afternoon, everyone. We are happy to welcome you today to this second part of the training webinar that is intended for SMEs and academia that we will be co-chairing today with Fia Westerholm. To start with the agenda, I will introduce you Peter van Bergen, who will say some welcoming words. So Peter studied industrial pharmacy, obtained a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences, and held a master degree in informatics. He joined the Belgian authorities in 2000. From 2016 to July 2020, he led the DG Pre-R&D department for clinical trials and unmet medical needs. In this role, he was a member state product owner for the ctis project. Since August 2020, Peter has taken the role of head of EMA clinical workstream and ctis program manager. So this being said, I wish you all a really nice session today, and I leave the floor to you, Peter.
Thank you, Stephanie. Much appreciated. Dear audience, very welcome. The honor is for me to welcome you at the second day. We have a very large audience, academia and SMEs, and it confirms a huge justified interest in the domain. So we have a representation of each of the organizations in this primary target group. I would like to thank you, the speakers from EMA, the Commission, CTS team, Green ERTC, with panel members from the Commission and CTFG on top of it. What can I say shortly, briefly about the regulation? It's about the future of academic and clinical research in the Union. Important to us all. This is the strong point we have in the Union, the network of academics and clinical research. So it must be fostered, and I'm very honored for your interest because this confirms that we are on the right track. The future is what we make ourselves from it. So please, thank you in advance for your attention. Be prepared for the regulation and its very nice system, ctis. So just a recap, and Fia will do a much larger recap after me. Thank you for this. So before May 2004, we had the directive, the 2001-20. Different processes and requirements for clinical trial authorizations, not really much helpful. So there was the directive. But the directive means national translations, in national legislation. But still, it could be improved. And this was done in the directive. And one saw that it could even much better. So in 2012 started the writing of the regulation, the 536, which was published in May 2014. And the goals of the regulation are the following. Harmonization in the Union. So you have one common part 1 with protocol IB, which allows much faster upscaling for multinational trials. Also, it answers to an increased request to have more transparency to the public. And it fosters innovation as well. So where are we with the system? The regulation is complex. The system by itself, by definition, also complex. We are now in the audit phase. Regulation will be launched 6 months after the publication in the OJ of the confirmation by the EMA board of the full functionality of the European portal and database, further referred to CTS, the Clinical Trials Information System. What I can tell you, is the following. Please see both systems very close to each other, both the regulation and ctis. Study them together. EMA is only responsible to explain how ctis would be used, but you have to study them together. It will be much more efficient for your learning process. Okay. This is what I had in mind. The next steps, we are now putting lots of efforts on the preparation of the go live. And what I can tell you, for ctis, how we can prepare yourselves. Prepare yourself, define the functions and the processes embedded in ctis, map them to your own organization. If needed, adapt your organization to it. This goes much smoother. Choose the people to work with ctis. It means either you work centralized or decentralized, but have these decisions up front, and especially train the people. And I wish you a very nice training experience for the rest of the day. Thanks a lot. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Peter, for your welcoming words. So now to start with session 1, I will now introduce Fia Westerholm, who will do a short recap of day 1. So to give some words about Fia, Fia is the Program Assurance Manager for the Clinical Trial Information System program. Her responsibilities include leading ctis change management, including member states and sponsor training programs and communications. She has education in veterinary medicine, toxicology, and social sciences, and holds more than 20 years of experience in areas of research and development, assessment and regulation of medicines, as well as managing at EU level and national level, encompassing both private and public sector. So thank you, Fia. I leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and a very good afternoon to everybody. This will be a very quick recap of what we did on the 22nd of February, just as a little preamble to the day that you have ahead. So as you can see, we've copied in the agenda of the 22nd of February. And that was a day where we looked at the regulation on one hand, then we heard about the benefits to come with ctis once ctis goes live. And then we looked at aspects from people perspectives, user access management, user management, registrations, and we also looked at it from an organizational perspective, so the trial-centric and the organization-centric approach. And those were all explained to you so that you would understand the fundamentals. Now that then today, we will actually go into looking at the product itself, which is ctis. So just a few words about what happened last time, and we can go to the next slide then to have a look. So the goals of the regulation, the benefits of ctis, then you heard that on the day about the transition period, the 3-year transition period that will start at go live for sponsors under certain rules, and that member states will need to use ctis from day 1. Then we heard about the workspaces. An overview was given at that time. There is a secure workspace for authorities and another one for sponsors. If you don't register, you can't use them. So that is the fundament for the security of the workspaces. There will also be a public interface for purposes of transparency and to support research in the European Union. Then we heard about the user accounts. Everybody needs to self-register through the EMA account management system so that they can then enter ctis. We heard about the organizations, the organization-centric approach and the trial-centric approach. And the organization-centric approach is supposed to be for the larger companies, whereas there is then the trial-centric approach that can be used for those with only a small number of trials and there are certain aspects that come with those. So go back to the data and the presentations of the day, and then you receive more information about that. And the last major fundamental point that was presented on the day was about the roles and permissions in ctis. So there are several user roles in ctis, and they come with different permissions. It's important to understand what those different roles can do, so that then you can build a ctis user profile by combining those roles. And that was all I wanted to say about the 22nd of February, really. What is on this slide here, Peter already captured in his talk very much. So thank you from my side, and back to Stephanie.
Thank you a lot, Fia. So to continue with the agenda, I will now introduce you to Agnes Mathieu-Mendes, who will also join us today to give us some key messages about the clinical trial regulation. So Agnes Mathieu-Mendes is Deputy Head of the unit dealing with the quality, safety and innovation of medicinal products in the Directorate General on Health and Food Safety in the European Commission. Agnes joined the European Commission in 2006. She is a pharmacist by training and has a diploma in pharmaceutical engineering and industrial technology. Prior to the European Commission, Agnes held a position in the pharmaceutical industry and in the Council of Europe. So Agnes, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very pleased to participate in the second day of training on the ctis. I hope that you enjoyed the first day of training. One important message from my side is very much in line with what Peter and Fia said, and I will not take a lot of time about that, but it's clear that the CTR, the clinical trials regulation, is a new way of working. We believe that it will enter into force at the end of the year, or most likely in January next year. So you need to get prepared because it's a big change, but it's also an opportunity to have and streamlining the procedures. There is a transition. I explained during the first day that there is a transition of 3 years during which the regulation and the directive will still run in parallel. But overall, it's the right moment to learn about the new rules. And I strongly encourage all of you to become very actively engaged in implementing the new rules and learning and training your staff, if necessary, on the new principle. So thank you to Emma for organizing the workshop. Thank you to all of you for your attention. And I wish you a very good training. Thank you. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Agnes. So as next item in the agenda, we will have Laura Piopo, who will guide us through the submission of an initial application dossier in the CTIS. We will learn with her the structure, the data, and all the documents that we need for an initial application dossier. But before leaving the word to you, Laura will quickly introduce you. So Laura qualified as pharmacist before joining EMA in 2009 in the Compliance and Inspection Department, where she was responsible for the coordination and follow-up of GCP and pharmacovigilance inspections requested by CHMP. Since 2017, she has been working on the development of the clinical trial information system, defining and testing the system functionalities in collaboration with the member states and sponsor product owners and the European Commission. So Laura, I leave you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Stephanie, and good afternoon and welcome to this second training event on the clinical trial information system. So this afternoon we will cover several topics, starting from a description of the content and structure of the initial clinical trial application, followed then by a discussion on the changes and updates that can be made to the clinical trial application via substantial and non-substantial modification, We will also cover submission of notifications, submission of results, and workload and management. So it's really an overview of the ctis functionalities. So in this first presentation, we will cover the initial clinical trial application, or CTA. In this slide, you can see a high-level description of the different components of the clinical trial application that are further described in the next one. So maybe we can go to the next one for more details. Thank you. So there are different components in the clinical trial application form that is going to be completed by the sponsor users directly in ctis. The first section that will be displayed to the user is the form section, where the sponsors will be able to choose and set the trial category and define the timelines for the publication of data and documents. We will see more in details during the course of the afternoon that there are specific publication rules set up in the system, and depending on the trial category and the nature of the trial, the publication of the data and the documents can occur at a different point in time. This is to be defined in the form section. The following one is the member states concerned section. That is where the sponsor can choose the member states concerned where they intend to conduct the clinical trial. And then there are the two main parts described in the regulation, the part 1 of the dossier and the part 2, for which, as we have heard already before, part 1 documents are jointly reviewed by the RMS that is in the lead together with the member states concerned, and these include a set of documents that pertain more to the scientific aspects, let's say, of the conduct of the trial, like protocol documentation, product-related documents are all sitting in the part 1 of the dossier. And then there is the part 2 that includes documents that are more of ethical nature, of the ethical review, such as the template for the informed consent or the recruitment arrangements, together with other documents that are individually reviewed by each member state concerned. Then there is the evaluation section and the clinical trial application, where the sponsor can see the request for information, or RFI, that can be raised by the member states during the assessment. And from this section, they can also see the conclusion of the assessment and the corresponding assessment report for the part 1 and the part 2. So the sponsor can really see the evaluation done by the member states available from the evaluation tab. The last one is the timetable that gives a projection of the timelines for the evaluation. So the sponsor can see the due date for the assessment of part 1, for the assessment of part 2, and decision to have a projection of how long it will take, or the due dates for the assessment of the trial application. Next, please. Thanks. So about the initial application. The content and the structure of the dossier is in line with what is foreseen in the regulation and described in the Annex 1. That is really the reference, the legal text defining the content of the data and the documents that the sponsor users will have to provide. The initial application can be of two types, and the sponsor can choose what they wish to submit. They can decide to submit a full initial application, and this means that all the member states concerned will receive the part 1 and the part 2 documents. So this is in line with what is foreseen in Article 5 of the regulation. Or the sponsor can also decide to go for a partial initial, which means that all the member states concerned will receive the part 1, and some or none of the member states concerned will receive the part 2. So it's also possible to do a mix, that some member states receive the part 2 documents and others do not receive it. This is foreseen in Article 11 of the regulation. Regarding the language, there is of language requirements for the dossier. There is a reference in Article 26 of the regulation that says that the language of the application dossier should be determined by the member states concerned. So this means that every member state concerned will have the possibility to choose the language for the documentation that they wish to receive. And finally, the sponsor will have the possibility to update the information contained in the dossier via different means, and we will hear more about this during the rest of the afternoon. So updates can be made via responses to an RFI, so a request for information, or via substantial and non-substantial modification, or also updating documents when adding a new member state concern and provide the language, the documents in a different language, the one of the member state's concern being added. Next one, please. Now we have the clips. We have 5 video clips that will cover a period of 20 minutes. And they, in these clips, you can see in detail the different sections of the application. So you can really see the details to be provided in the form, in the product-related section, in the sponsor-related section, and in the part 2. Yes, I think we can play the clips now. Thank you, Barbara.
This video outlines in short the initial steps of the process to create an initial clinical trial application. It explains how to populate the introductory information of the dossier, the title of the trial and the sponsor organization, and how to fill in the first 2 sections of the dossier, the form, and the member state concerned, or MSC. Once you are logged in ctis, on the right side of the landing page, click on the New Trial button. In the pop-up window, there are 2 fields for the title of the trial and the sponsor organization. Type the full title of the trial in the first field. In the Search Organization area, use the Search Organization function to find the sponsor of the clinical trial application. This can be the sponsor you are working for, or on behalf of, in case of a clinical research organization. Once the 2 fields are complete, click on the Create button and a draft of the clinical trial will be created. You can see the full title of the trial, its number and the application status in draft, below the tabs. On the left side, you can see the sections of the application which need to be filled in with structured data and documents. On the right side, you can see 4 buttons. You can use the check button anytime to identify the mandatory fields in the various sections that have not been filled in. When you click on it, exclamation marks indicate the sections that those fields can be found. Use the Save button to save the progress up to that moment. Use the Cancel button to cancel your application. You can use it only while your trial application is in draft mode. Once all the necessary information has been populated to the various sections, and the application is complete and ready, use the Submit button to submit your application. On the left side, the first section in the list is that of the form. In the form details, 2 subsections for the cover letter of the application and for the deferral publication dates need to be filled in. Click on the Lock button and then on the arrow of the cover letter area to expand it. There are many fields in the application marked with an asterisk. Those fields are compulsory and must be filled in. Use the Add Document button to upload the cover letter document. Drag and drop the document on the gray area, or click on the gray area and select the document from your files. Click on the Attach button. The document has been uploaded in the field for the cover letter. Click on the Lock button in the next subsection. Use the drop-down menu to select the category of the trial. And use the field below to insert the justification for the selected trial category. More information on trial categories and deferral rules can be found on the e-learning of this module. Moving to the MSC section, you can specify in which MSCs you intended to conduct the trial and select the MSC that is the proposed reporting member state, or RMS. Click on the Lock button and the Add Member States button will appear. Click on it and in the pop-up window, use the drop-down menu to select the first member state. Click the button Add Another to add more member states. In this example, Austria and Germany have been selected. In the Subjects column, insert the number of the subjects that are expected to participate in the trial in each member state. Use the radio buttons to indicate which member state you want to propose as RMS. You can use the bin icon to remove a member state that was selected by mistake. Once you have filled in the required details, the Add button becomes active. Click on it to add the selected member states. The area below conveys to the user read-only information on the countries outside of the European Economic Area, or EEA, where the trial is intended to be conducted, including the estimated total population for EEA and outside EEA patients. This information is populated in the Part 1 of the dossier. This video outlines in short how to fill out one of the 3 subsections of the Part 1 section of an initial clinical trial application. The Trial Details subsection. In the Sponsor workspace, in Part 1, use the lock button of the Trial Details subsection to be able to work on the various subsections and click on the arrows to expand the working areas of each subsection. Any field with an asterisk is a mandatory field. The video will focus on those fields only. More information on the content and the structure of the Part 1 can be found in the e-learning of this module. In the Trial Identifiers subsection, you can edit the full trial title and you need to insert a public title. You can add a translation of the titles, using the respective buttons on the right side. Select the language from the drop-down list. Type the translated title and click on the Confirm button. Below, you can add the protocol code and secondary identifiers for the trial, if they are available. Scroll down, and open the Trial Information subsection. Select the trial phase from the drop-down menu. And add the medical condition, using the button Add Condition found on the right side. In the pop-up window, type the condition. And indicate whether it is considered a rare disease or not, using the tick box on the left side. You can also add translation. Click on the Confirm button. Scroll down, and insert the therapeutic area, using the drop-down list. Below, insert the trial scope, using the drop-down menu. You may insert multiple values. In this example, safety, efficacy and therapy are selected. Below, type the main objective in its respective field. Scroll down, and click on the Add Inclusion Criteria button. In the pop-up window, type the inclusion criterion on the available field. Click on the Confirm button. You may add more than one value in this subsection. Follow the same procedure to insert the appropriate exclusion criteria and primary endpoints. Scroll down, and in the trial duration area, use the calendars and insert the estimated recruitment start date and the end of trial date. Below, in the subsection of the population of trial subjects, insert the age range from the drop-down list. Additional information in terms of gender and whether the subjects of the trial belong to vulnerable population or not can be provided. Below, open the next subsection, the clinical trial protocol, and click on the Add Document button, found in the protocol area. Either drag and drop the document on the gray area or click on the gray area to browse your files and select the document. Click on the Attach button. The remaining fields of this subsection are not mandatory. This video outlines in short how to fill out one of the 3 subsections of the Part 1 section in an initial clinical trial application. The Sponsor's Details subsection. In the Sponsor workspace, in the Sponsors subsection of Part 1, use the lock button to expand the area and work on the various subsections. The subsection includes the sponsor information, introduced at the time of the creation of the initial application, and additional information on the contact details required by the regulation. Click on the button Add Contact Point for Union. Below, An area dedicated to the contact point for European Union appears. Scroll down to find the contact details and fill in the mandatory fields. Back to the sponsor organization details. Click on the line that contains the sponsor, and the button Add Contacts will appear on the right side. Click on it and additional contact points appear in the pop-up list. Click on the legal representative from the list. In the pop-up window, you need to select the organization of the legal representative. Search for the organization, using the search functionality. Select the organization from the results. And click on the button Add Legal Representative. A new area dedicated to the legal representative appears. Fill in the mandatory contact details fields. Note that this is only necessary to complete, in case the sponsor of the trial is not based in the European Union. In that case, a legal representative based in the European Union needs to be appointed. You still need to add the scientific contact point and the public contact point. From the Add Contacts button, click on the scientific contact point. You will be asked to associate it with a sponsor. Click on the line of the sponsor that you wish to add the contact points for, and then, click on the Select button. Below, the area dedicated to the scientific contact point expands. Fill in the mandatory contact details fields. Tick in the box below if the sponsor scientific contact point is the same with the public contact point. If they are not the same, you need to repeat the procedure, but selecting this time the public contact point from the Add Contacts button. Last, you can add the third party, in case tasks, or functions on the trial, have been delegated to third parties. In the pop-up window, as you did previously with the legal representative, use the search functionality to find the organization. Select it from the results. And click on the Add Third Party button. Scroll down, to find the area dedicated to the third party. And click on the pencil icon to add the duties and contact details. Fill in the required fields, and click on the Confirm button. You can remove any of the contact points by using the Remove button, or the bin icon in the case of the third party. This video outlines in short how to fill out one of the 3 subsections of the Part 1 section in an initial clinical trial application. The Products subsection. In the Sponsor workspace, in Products subsection of Part 1, use the Lock button to expand the area and work on the various subsections. If you click on the Register button, you will be redirected to the Extended Udrovigilance Medicinal Product Dictionary page, where you can register new products or substances. Click on the Add button to retrieve product details that are already registered in the Udrovigilance database. Select the role of the product. In this example, a test product will be selected for inclusion in the application. It is mandatory to have at least one test product in the application. A drop-down for the test card appears. Click on the arrow. And then, click on the Add button below. In this example, an authorized substance is selected. In the pop-up form, insert a value in the mandatory field name. Use the other fields, or the drop-down list on the upper right corner, to better define your criteria, and to narrow down your results, and click on the Search Substances button. Select the substance from the results. And in the end of the window, click on the Add Substance button. Click on the arrow with the added test role and substance, to expand the working area again, as you need to populate additional details. Click on the selected substance, to reveal subsections that need to be populated. Structured data fields for the product will need to be completed. Expand the product characteristics subsection. And from the drop-down list, select one or more values. Open the dosage and administration details subsection. Fill in the mandatory fields, indicated with asterisks. Open the subsection below. to indicate whether the selected medicinal product has been modified in relation to its marketing authorization. Open the Orphan Designation subsection to report whether the selected medicinal product has an orphan drug designation. Scroll down in the following subsections where you need to upload documents. Expand the investigator brochure for the medicinal product and upload the investigator brochure document, or the summary of product characteristics document. At least one of the two documents should be provided. More documents need to be uploaded in the rest subsections. Scroll down to the last subsection of Part 1, where all the uploaded documents are listed. This video outlines in short how to fill in the Part 2 section of an initial trial and how to submit it. Part 2 includes information individually for each member state concerned, or MSC, and consists of two different subsections: the trial sites and the documents that are provided to support the application. In the sponsor workspace, in Part 2, you need to upload the necessary documents for each member states concerned, or MSC. Start from the first MSC, which in this example is Austria. Click on the lock button to be able to work on the various subsections, and use the arrows to expand the working areas of each subsection. In the trial sites subsection, click on the arrow button to expand the area of the subsection. Click on the Add Site button to insert the site where the clinical trial will be conducted. In the pop-up window, use the search functionalities to find the organization. Select the trial site from the results, and click on the Add Trial Site. The details of the site are listed below, on the left side. On the right side, the details of the investigator need to be populated. In the Actions column, click on the pencil icon to populate the details of the investigator. In the pop-up window, fill in the mandatory details fields, and click on the Confirm button. Mandatory fields are indicated with the asterisk. This video will focus on these fields. More information on the content and the structure of Part 2 can be found in the e-learning. Use the bin icon if you wish to remove the selected site, and the pencil icon if you wish to edit the details of the site, or the investigator. More sites for the same member state can be added, if needed. Scroll down in the second subsection for documents, and you will see various fields in which you need to upload the supporting documentation. Open the recruitment arrangements, and upload the document by using the Add Document button. In the pop-up form, either drag and drop the document on the gray area, or click on the gray area, and browse your files to find the document you want to upload. Click on the Attach button. Use the same functionalities to upload the remaining documents of Part 2. You can also bulk upload all the documents of Part 2 in the subsection All Documents, found in the end of Part 2 page, and specify the document types when they are added. Once you finish with the first MSC, you need to follow the same procedure for the other MSCs. In this example, it would be Germany. Below Part 2 section, click on the second MSC. You need to fill in Part 2 for the second MSC. Populate the necessary data and upload the required documents in both trial sites and documents subsections, as you did previously for the first MSC. Once you finish with the second MSC, you can save your application by clicking on the Save button, found on top. You can also click on the Check button to verify whether you have missed any field or document from any section of the dossier, as this would prevent you from submitting your application. Red exclamation marks appear to indicate the sections where something still needs to be completed. In this example, the exclamation mark appears in the Part 2 section for the second MSC. The field with missing information is highlighted in red. Open the subsection and upload the missing document, which is mandatory, as indicated by the asterisk. Upload the missing document using the Add Document button. You can use again the Check button for a final check. The green message on the upper right corner indicates that the trial is valid and is ready to be submitted. Click on the Submit button. In the pop-up window, Use the checkboxes to submit the Part 2 of each of the MSCs. Part 1 is always included by default in the submission of an initial trial application. After your selection, click on the Confirm button. In the submission confirmation form that follows, view the summary and if you agree, tick in the relevant box, and then, click in the Confirm button. You will see a green message that informs you that your application has been successfully submitted. You will be transferred in the page of the clinical trial in which the status has changed from draft to under evaluation.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for playing the clips. So just to recap on what we have seen in this first part of the training course to describe the content of an initial clinical trial application. So just to recap on some main concepts. So as you have seen, the completion of the dossier occurs entirely when the user is logged into ctis. So the dossier, the clinical trial application form, is really a combination of structured data that the user will have to populate and documents that will have to be uploaded in the system. Of course, the documents will have to be produced and finalized outside of ctis, but when ready, can be uploaded in the system for submission to the regulatory authorities. You have seen that the system has mandatory fields that are marked with an asterisk, so the user can see which fields needs to be populated before they can progress with the submission. If all the mandatory fields are not complete, the sponsor cannot progress. You can also check with the button check functionality and be guided by the red symbols that are displayed if mandatory fields have not been populated. In addition to this, we have a padlock. The padlock mechanism avoids that multiple users, concurrent users, are working on the same section of the application. So when you are working on a section, you have to click on the lock. And in this way, you are the only one that can modify the section. Other colleagues in the organization will not be able to work. This has been done in order to avoid overwriting of the work of people working at the same time. Another important functionality that we also mentioned on the 22nd of February is that, as you have seen, ctis consume data from existing databases. So you have seen that the sponsor details, the organization details, as well as the details of a CRO, a clinical research organization to which tasks have been delegated, or the product details are taken from existing databases. So from OMS for the organization and from XCVMPD, the Extended User Vigilance Medicinal Product Dictionary, for the product details. So in order for the sponsor to be able to use this data when completing the form in ctis, they will have to ensure that the information is already available in OMS and in XCVMPD. I also would like to raise the point on the update that is possible both when an application is in draft. You have seen that there is the pencil icon and the trash bin or the remove bin, where you can modify as many times as you wish the application while it's in draft. Because being in draft, it means that has not yet been submitted. So only you as a sponsor can see it. And in this way, you can modify the application all the time that you need. After submission, there are mechanisms in place also to update the information in the application form via responses to the RFI, so the request for information, or substantial and non-substantial modification. And this is really the focus of the second part of this training event. Thank you, Barbara. I think we can put the PPT on now, the presentation, to introduce the substantial modification. Thanks. So the next one, please. Thank you. So this is the same slide as we have seen for the initial. Now, I hope that the content of the initial is a little bit more clear. Is what you can see on the left-hand side, the content of an initial application. On the right-hand side, you can see the functionalities that are implemented in ctis that enable changes to be done to an application via substantial modification or the addition of a new member state's concern that are called application per se because they require an assessment that is done by the member states concerned, but also other mechanisms that are in place in the system to update the dossier are the non-substantial modification and their responses to the requests for information. So now let's focus a little bit more on the substantial modification and the addition of a member state's concern. Thank you. So in the substantial modification, as described as foreseen in the regulation, there are 3 types of substantial modification that the sponsor can submit in ctis. The substantial modification can be for part 1 only, or for part 2 only, or for both parts. And here you have the reference to the relevant articles of the regulation. So what is a substantial modification? Once that an initial application has been authorized, a substantial modification is a modification to the application dossier, which is likely to have a substantial impact on the safety or the rights of the subject and on the reliability and robustness of the data generated in the trial. So this is the definition taken from the regulation of what is a substantial modification. Depending on the type of changes that need to be done, the sponsor can choose if they want to submit an SM part 1 only, part 2 only, or both. The addition of a new member state concern is also a modification to what was an initial application because it's expanding the territorial scope of the trial by including a new member state concern. And this is foreseen in Article 14 of the regulation. So once that the initial application has been authorized, of course by at least one member state concern, it will be possible for the sponsor to submit an application to add a new member state concern and provide translation of documents according to the requirements of that member state. It will be possible to submit more than one application at a time. So after an initial application has been authorized, as a sponsor, you can add multiple member states at the same time and add them in parallel, let's say. The newly added member state concern will consider the assessment already done at the time of the initial application on the part 1 and will be in the position to document new consideration for the part 1. Also, part 2 documents will have to be provided for the newly added member state concern and they will be assessed independently. Now we have other 2 clips.
This video outlines in short how to submit the different types of substantial modification applications. The single trial substantial modification, and the multi-trial substantial modification. In the sponsor workspace, in the page of an authorized clinical trial, click on Create button on the right-hand side. This will enable you to choose the application that you wish to draft and submit. By clicking on Single Trial Substantial Modification, you will be redirected to a window, where the scope of the substantial modification should be further specified. By selecting the type of modification, you will define the section of the application dossier that will be modified. In the Form section, you can provide details on the nature of the substantial modification, by uploading documents on the fields of the cover letter and the modification description, and adding details on the supporting information field. After uploading the documents, scroll down, and you can choose the appropriate reason from the substantial modification reason list, which includes values related to the scientific and ethical aspects of the trial, or information on notifications. The field on substantial modification scope allows you to further explain which parts of the application will be impacted by the substantial modification. In the section of Member State Concerned, or MSC, you cannot insert a new MSC, as this occurs via a dedicated application and not via the substantial modification. The button Add Member States is inactive. In this section, you can only modify the anticipated number of subjects to be recruited in the trial. Part 1 and Part 2 data and documents can be modified as needed, and once completed the application can be submitted. In this example, in the Protocol Information subsection, an additional document, related to the substantial modification, has been uploaded. Once you modify the data and the documents, click on the Submit button, and select the parts of the application you want to submit. Click on the Confirm button. Review the Submit confirmation form, and if you agree, tick in the relevant box, and click on the Confirm button. A green message informs you that your substantial modification was submitted successfully. Back in the summary page of the clinical trial, scroll down to the Application and Non-Substantial Modification subsection, and you will see your substantial modification listed. You can view basic information for the substantial modification. Each MSc will issue a decision on the evaluation of any type of substantial modification, and this decision will be notified to the sponsor. Click on the plus icons to view the reason and the scope of the substantial modification. Click on the Info button to view additional information. The ctis also caters for the functionality to submit multi-trial substantial modifications, to modify details for trials that have the same investigational medicinal product and the same sponsor. With this functionality, you can submit a single application to update information affecting several trials. The submission of this single substantial modification application affecting several trials will then trigger an assessment done by the member states concerned for each trial, issuing a decision on the substantial modification. This video outlines in short how to submit an application to add a new member state concerned, or MSc, to a previously authorized trial. In the sponsor workspace, in the page of an authorized clinical trial, click on the Create button on the right-hand side, and choose Additional MSc to add a new MSc. In the pop-up window, you can select one or many MScs to add at the same time, and specify for each of them the number of subjects. After selecting the additional MScs, click on the Add button. Each application is treated individually by the MSc that has received the application. In this example, only one new MSc is added, Germany. In the Form section, click on the Lock button, and expand the Cover Letter subsection to upload the cover letter for the new application per MSc. Click on the Add Document button, and in the pop-up window, drag and drop the document in the gray area, or click on it, browse your files to find the document, and upload it. Below, in dedicated space, you can upload the proof of payment. In the Part 1 section, you can provide the translation of the Part 1 of the dossier, in the language of the newly added MSc. This includes, for example, translation of structured data such as the medical condition, trial objectives, eligibility criteria, endpoints. You can insert, for example, the inclusion criteria in the language of the additional MSc. On the right-hand side, in the Actions column, click on the pencil icon. In the pop-up window, click on the Add Translation button. Select the language of the added MSc, and type the translated inclusion criterion. Click on the Confirm button. The translation of the inclusion criterion has been added. Scroll down to the Documents Translation subsection. Click on the Lock button if you need to add translations for the documents that have been uploaded in Part 1. You can use the list to select the document you need to translate. For example, you can add the protocol in the language of the additional MSc. Use the Add Document button to upload it. In the pop-up window, drag and drop the document in the gray area, or click on it, browse your files to find the translated document, and select it. You can also indicate the language of the translated document from the language list. Click on the Attach button. The translated document has been added. In the Part 2 section, you need also to provide the site details and the Part 2 documents for the newly added MSc. It is possible for the sponsor to submit one of more applications to add a member state concerned at the time.
So we have seen, thank you for the clips, we have seen how the sponsor can apply changes to an initial clinical trial application via the means of a substantial modification. and how a new member state can be added. So for the substantial modification, just to mention that it is mandatory for the sponsor to provide a description of the changes that they have done with the substantial modification. So this is one of the mandatory fields that the member states will need to receive in order to have an overview of the changes made. In addition, there is the possibility to complete a free text in the system to explain for each section the changes made. With the SAM, the sponsor can also specify when completing the form the reason why the substantial modification has been done and the scope. And also, as you have seen, it's possible to submit a mono trial substantial modification or a substantial modification that covers several trials. But the condition is that they have to, these trials, they need to have the same product and the same sponsor. That will be in the scope of the SAM. Regarding the addition of a member state's concern, this functionality enables the sponsor to include new member states in the conduct of the trial, and you can provide translations for the free text, for the structured data for some of them, like inclusion and exclusion criteria, endpoints, or the title of the trial. This can be translated in the new language of the newly added member state concern, and also documents. As we have seen, protocol as well as product-related documentation can be provided in another language. In both cases, so for the substantial modification and for the addition of a new member state concern, an assessment is then required by the member states that receive the application. And this is different from the non-substantial modification that is really in the scope of the next point. So now we can put the presentation, I think, for the non-SM and the reply to an RFI. So what we have seen so far are the changes with a substantial modification that, as we have said, are important changes that might have an impact on the benefit risk profile of the trial or the robustness of the data. The non-SM are different, of course. They are mentioned in the regulation in Article 81.9 and are changes to the clinical trials which are non-substantial by definition, but are still relevant for the supervision of the clinical trial by the member states concerned. So the sponsor is encouraged to keep the dossier up to date and provide this information even if the changes are non-substantial, but still relevant for the supervision. So this is a functionality that is implemented in ctis to enable the sponsors to keep the dossier up to date. And once submitted, these non-substantial modifications do not require member states assessment. So it's different from the SM. So non-SM can be applied to each part of the clinical trial application. So similarly to what we have seen for the SM, also the non-SM can be for part 1 only, or part 2 only, or both parts. And also in this case, a description of the changes made with the non-SM has to be provided by the sponsor. There are business rules that have been implemented in ctis to control what can be modified by the sponsor via a non-SM, via the non-SM mechanism. So you will see that once the user clicks on create non-SM, not all the fields are editable. And this is expected because only some of the fields in the application form can be modified via the means of a non-SM. So here you can see some example of what can be modified with a non-substantial modification. These include translation of data and documents in the application dossier, if this is required. Translation of the fields that you have seen before in the clip can be made via non-substantial modification, or a change in the number of clinical trial participants for the trial. Any change of the entities or the contact details to whom the sponsor has delegated the task, so CRO, clinical research organization, that can be involved in the conduct of the trial, or the extension of the validity of an insurance certificate. So these are just, of course, it's not an exhaustive list, to give an indication of the type of information that can be modified with a non-SM. So for the non-SM, we don't have clips, so we've put together some screenshots taken from the system so that you can see how it will look like and to get familiar with this functionality. So as you can see, it's quite similar to what you have already seen for the substantial modification. So the user will have to go into the summary page of the application dossier, click on create, that is on the top right, and then there is this list displayed, and the user can choose non-substantial modification. Next. Then also in this case, it will be possible to choose the scope if it's for both parts or only one part in a similar way as we have seen for the substantial modification. Next one, please. Then the version of the dossier, a new version of the dossier is created. So the form opens and the user is able to modify some of the fields with a non-substantial modification, update contact details, update the number of expected patients to be enrolled in the trial, and so on. And you can see that a new version of the dossier is created. And this is highlighted in the red box that you can see. There is like a version mechanism implemented for you to see the previous version of the application and the new one that you are creating with a non-SM. And of course, there is an identifier associated with a non-SM. In this case, you can read non-SM1. Next one, please. The user will have to populate the free text with the description of the changes made. There is a small asterisk, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is one of the mandatory fields. So also in this case, for the non-substantial modification, the sponsor will have to explain the scope of the changes that have been made to the application, and then they can progress with the submission. Next slide. Once the non-substantial modification is submitted, is displayed in the overview list of application for the trial. You can see it in the red box. In this case was non-SM number 1, covering part 1 and part 2, submitted to one member state, Austria. And then you can see the submission date that is also displayed. So this is to give you a flavor, really high level of how the functionality will look like for the non-substantial modification, and also see the analogy of the mechanism that we have with SM. With the difference that, of course, non-SM are just for a restricted number of fields and do not require any evaluation by the member states concerned. Now we focus on the RFI. RFI that stands for request for information that can be raised by the member states during the evaluation phase of any application. So this being an initial application or a substantial modification or the addition of a member state concern. The member states have the possibility to raise questions to the sponsor and the sponsor to reply. So the RFI can be raised at any time during the evaluation of an application. They can be raised at the time of validation, the assessment of part 1, the assessment of part 2, of course, as this is applicable. The RFI has to be addressed by the sponsor within the deadline that are imposed by the RMS for any RFI on part 1 and by the member states concerned for any RFI in part 2. If the sponsor does not reply to the request for information within the deadline that are set by the member states, being the member states concerned or the RMS, the application will lapse. And the regulation is quite clear about this concept of application lapsing in the absence of a reply to the RFI. So the raising an RFI automatically leads to an extension of the timelines for the evaluation, as this is foreseen in the regulation. But regardless of the number of RFI raised, this extension will occur only once. To give you a practical example, if during the assessment of part 1 an RFI is raised, there will be an extension of 31 days, as foreseen in the regulation, with a maximum of 12 days for the sponsor to reply. If another RFI is raised and another one, by chance, the extension of these 31 days will occur only once. So the timelines are not extended multiple times, depending on the number of the RFI raised. Next one, please. Yes, just to mention that the RFI mechanism, so the possibility to have an exchange of information between the sponsor and the member state, is also implemented in ctis to enable the sponsor to provide responses in case of requests that are raised outside of the evaluation process of an application. So there is this dialogue, this mechanism to exchange information between sponsor and member states, also in case of an ad hoc assessment. So when a notification, for example, of serious breach or unexpected events is submitted, the member state, they can also raise requests for information to the sponsor, or in case the member states are considering to apply a corrective measure and they can request the sponsor opinion. This is foreseen in Article 77. But in these cases, there is no possibility to modify the dossier. So modification of the dossier is not allowed with these responses. A modification can only be done for RFI that are raised in the context of an initial application or substantial modification or addition of a member state concern, as foreseen in the regulation.
This video outlines in short how to make changes to an application dossier in the context of a response to a request for information, or RFI. How to save and view the changes on the application. And how to view the other drafts of the application. In the evaluation section of the trial page, you can see 2 RFIs related to the validation of the trial. Use the arrows to expand the working area of the first RFI, and click on the lock button to be able to work on this RFI and respond to it. If for the RFI response, you need to change the application, based on the contextual information provided in the RFI, click on the Change Application button, and then, on the Confirm button. A green message appears on the upper right corner, informing you that a new version of the application is being drafted. On top, below the trial title, the blue-colored ribbon informs you that a new version has been drafted. You can have an application version open in draft mode, to address one RFI at a time, received in each section. Since 2 RFIs have been received during the validation phase, you can have a new version in draft, to address one RFI at a time. In this validation-related draft, you can make changes in the Forms section, in Part 1, or in Part 2. After the validation, the member states concerned, or MSCs, will proceed with the assessment of Part 1 and Part 2 and will submit relevant RFIs, if needed. In this example, there are RFIs for the Part 1, and also RFIs for the Part 2, raised by each MSC. As a result, in this case you might have up to 3 different drafts of the application, under the condition that each draft is related to different dossier parts of the evaluation phase. 1 draft for Assessment Part 1, 1 draft for Assessment Part 2 of Austria, and another one, for Assessment Part 2 of Germany. You may navigate to the various drafts from the blue ribbon on top that refers to the draft ID. Use the drop-down button to move from the one draft to the other. Select the draft you want to work with. In this example, there is only 1 draft related to an RFI for the assessment of Part 1. Click on the lock button to make the necessary changes. In this example, the full title and the public title of the trial are subject to changes. Type in the fields the correct titles. Below, the protocol document needs to change. Click on the Update button to upload a new version of the document. In the pop-up form, drop the new version on the gray area, or click on the gray area. Browse your folders and select the correct file. The field version is indicated by an asterisk and it is mandatory to be filled in. Insert the number of the version. You can use the comment field to provide additional information. Click on the Update button. The new version of the document has been uploaded. You can still access the previous version of the document by using the Previous Versions label, found on the right side. You can also upload a second document by using the Add Document button. After you insert the changes, save them by clicking the Save button on the upper right corner. Once you save the changes, on the left side, where the sections are listed, you can see a blue dot appearing next to Part 1. This blue dot indicates that changes have been inserted on that specific section. The fields that have changed are highlighted in yellow rectangles. A yellow tooltip appears on the right side. If you hover your mouse over the tooltip, the ID of the RFI appears. Scroll down to the end of the page to view the documents that have changed. The protocol has also been changed as part of the RFI response, and the drop-down arrow that allows you to access the previous version appears on the right side. Relevant comments might indicate the origin of the change. In the end of the page, you can use the bar to hide the highlighting rectangles on the changed fields. This functionality is available to identify the changes done with RFI responses, or due to substantial modifications. After you insert the required changes and save your draft, click on the Evaluation section to go back to the RFI working area, and to progress with the submission of the updated application dossier and RFI responses. You cannot submit your response unless you reply to each one of the considerations. You can see the steps in the last video clip of this module. This video outlines in short how to respond to each of the considerations that comprise the request for information, or RFI, how to submit the RFI response, and how to view the submitted versions of the clinical trial application. You have two ways of responding to an RFI, depending on what the MSc requests. By only addressing the considerations raised by the MSc, or by making changes in the application dossier in addition to addressing the considerations. Click on the Lock button to be able to work on a response to the RFI. In this case, on the trial page, changes have been applied in the application as part of the RFI response. On the right side, you can use the Discard Changes button to remove the changes on the application that were populated. If you keep the changes below, click the Add Document button to upload a document to describe the changes on the application that were introduced as part of this specific RFI response. Be sure that the Includes Application Changes box is ticked in. Below, in the dedicated field, you can add more documents to support your response, as indicated in the blue text box. Scroll down to the area of the considerations to respond separately to each one of them. Click on the Lock button to unlock the area and be able to type your response in the dedicated field. You can also upload additional supporting documents for the consideration by using the Add Document button. The Submit Response button is inactive. You need first to save your response using the respective button, and then you will enable the Submit Response button. Click on it to submit your RFI response. A message on the upper right corner indicates that the RFI response has been submitted. Since you just submitted an RFI response, including changes on the application, you have created a new version of the application. The blue dots indicate changes on the sections of the dossier. Click on Part 1 section, and on the right side, use the Versions drop-down button to view the different submitted versions of the application. Versions that were created due to validation RFIs will be listed in both Part 1 and 2 sections. Besides the initial version and the two common versions that are originated from RFIs related to validation, there are two versions from assessment of Part 1. Part 2 section will be having different sequence of submitted application versions from that of Part 1. It will have the common versions, originated from the initial application and RFIs related to validation, and a version from RFI responses related to Part 2 assessment in that MSc.
Are also available on the EMA website in the training part section for CTIS, so they are also available there. And regarding the recording of these events, this will also be made available, and I think Barbara will tell you more on this aspect towards the end of the training course. So is recorded and will be made available in later stage. Regarding the RFI, just to recap on what we have seen. So the responses to the request for information that are raised by the member states give the possibility to the sponsor user to update the dossier. You have seen that there is the functionality change application and provide new documentation, update the free text Also, in this case, we have a versioning mechanism that is implemented in the system so that the user can see under which RFI the changes have been made, and these are also easily identifiable by the blue dot. In addition to this, every time that a sponsor user replies to an RFI, whether they do changes to an application or not, they will also have to reply to the considerations that are part of the RFI via responses in a free text, and they have the possibility also to upload documents to support the response that they provide. And then via submitting their responses, they make the response available also to the member states concerned to review. I think this was the last clip that we had to cover the process of completing an initial application, explain how the changes can be done via the different mechanisms. So I'll give the floor back to the chairs. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Laura, for this amazing presentation. So now we will move towards the last point of this session. So we'll have a panel discussion with Q&As. So I will be joined in this panel by Fia, Laura, Peter, that you already saw speaking earlier, but we will have also the additional members that will be Andrea Seidel-Glatzer, Christophe Bonarens, and Fatima Simos. So I will give a short view of the three added panelists so that you know who they are. So Andrea Seidel-Glatzer, she prior to joining the University Hospital of Heidelberg 10 years ago, Andrea gained some years experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Since March 2020, Andrea joins EMA's clinical trial information system testing as a representative of the academia on behalf of the German ctis network. This is an association of 26 clinical trial centers, all located at medical faculties and university hospitals with the common task to strengthen activities in clinical trials. We also have Fatima Simos. So Fatima studied industrial pharmacy and obtained a post-degree in clinical trials monitoring. She has worked in Infarmed since 2005 in the clinical trial unit and is a senior clinical trial coordinator. She has also been a coordinator for technical and regulatory support to academic trial submissions. She is a member of the CTFG and is a CTIS member state product owner, an expert for the EMA training team, and a master trainer for Portugal. And last but not least, we have also Christophe Bonarens. So Christophe started working for the Belgian Federal Agency of Medicines and Health Products in 2005. And in 2009, he took responsibility for the R&D division in charge of clinical trial applications. He was a member of the Clinical Trial Facilitation Group and a representative in the European Commission Clinical Trial Expert Group. After a brief period working for the Association of the Belgian Pharmaceutical Industry from 2016 onwards, he joined the EU Commission in 2019. So I welcome all the panelists that are joining us today. And so I will start with my questions as last time. So to start with the first question, I think it will be addressed to Fatima. So for ongoing studies where there are some EU countries in the VHP and some new non-VHP EU countries, which have country-specific protocol IMPD version, how can the sponsor transfer the CT for CTIS submission? Does there is a need for harmonization upfront, or how does it happen?
Hello to all the colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, as a member of CTFG, what I can tell is that we are drawing up rules and also some guidances that will be published as soon as possible to be able to provide the sponsors all the information that they will need to ensure the transition of the VHP trials. So you will be informed as soon as possible. This is being done within the CTFG group. but of course that all this information will be also published at the HMA page, CTFG page. At the moment, I cannot give you a specific indication on how can we do this, how this will be done, because this is still under discussing. But what I can ensure is that as soon as it's concluded, it will be available in our website, in the CTFG website.
We have a date or not yet, Fatima, for that?
I think we are expecting to do this in the few months, 3-4 months or less.
Good. Thank you. My next question would be, what forms will be used to create an initial application and a substantial modification? Will the template be available in PDF at the portal, or will it be a template fillable online and signed electronically? Maybe I can ask this question to Laura.
Yes. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the question. So as we have seen from the clips, the clinical trial application form is completed entirely when the user logs into the system. So it's a combination of structured data that has to be populated in the system directly and the documents that can be uploaded. There is no this functionality of signing the documents electronically into the ctis. The documents will have to be prepared outside of the system and when ready, uploaded into the system. As we have seen in the different clips, this is valid for all the applications, from the initial to the STEM and the addition of a member state concern.
Good. Thank you, Laura. My next question would be, will we continue to apply for the Udacity number? Will applications for the Udacity number be done via this portal, or should we continue to apply as before? Maybe I can ask also this question to Laura.
Yes, the system automatically generates, when a new clinical trial application is created by the sponsor, automatically generates what we call the EU city number, that also in the format is similar to the EU Udacity number. So this is automatically created by ctis.
Thank you, Laura. My next question maybe can be addressed by Fatima and is as follows. Are Part 2 documents submitted in the portal? France actually is using an informatic system to submit and manage submission to ethics committees. Will the CTIS submission replace submission at this portal in France, for instance? That's the question we received.
Well, if I'm understanding, the question is that if the part 2, in this case of a clinical trial, will be assessed under the system. Well, according to the regulation, you will need to use the system to submit part 1 and part 2. This submission may be done in one way, so in the same moment, at the same moment, or in a subsequential way. So you may assess part 1 and then submit part 2 for a specific country. But indeed, we need to change our way of working and start to use the system according to what is established in the regulation.
Thank you, Fatima, really clear. So my next question would be, would it be possible to carry out specific training on the creation of an initial order dossier, including medicines, medical devices, and CE marketing? Maybe, Fia, I can ask this question to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephanie, for that question. We have a basic catalog which is already quite extensive on the modules of CTIS. We can always consider adding modules if they are required. We need to look at what we create and in what order, so that we are sure that we address it in priority order. But we are always very happy if we get ideas and suggestions, and then we can look into those. It's not impossible. When is the question, I think. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Fia. I have a next question. Is it possible to replace correct documents after the submission? It is a common problem that some sponsors notice discrepancies, for instance, Udacity forms, so they want to correct before the study is approved. So maybe, Laura, you can explain to us if this can or not be done.
Yes, as we have seen in the clips, the update is possible via, depending on the nature of the updates that have to be done, via substantial or non-substantial modification, but also if the member states requires further information to the sponsor, they can keep the dossier up to date with the responses to the RFI. So this is after that an application has been submitted. Before that, when the application is still in draft, the sponsor can modify as many times as is needed, because when it's in draft, it's only visible to the sponsor, and of course they can work on it into the system before the submission to the member state concerned.
Thank you, Laura. The next question would be, is there a notification process to follow for non-substantial modifications? Maybe Laura, is again for you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So reading the question again, is that a notification process?
Yes, sorry, I went too fast maybe. Is there a notification process to follow for non-substantial modifications?
Notification process. Okay, the notification is what, or a notice is what the member states will receive to be informed that a substantial modification has been submitted. Is for the sponsor to see if the dossier that they have submitted and has been authorized will require to be modified, and if a substantial modification will be needed to keep the dossier up to date. So once that a substantial modification, depending on what the sponsor considers that is needed, has been provided and submitted to the sponsor, to the member states, they will receive a notice. In the notices and alerts, we will see this functionality more later on during the course of the afternoon, and be informed that a change has been made and needs to be assessed.
Thank you, Laura. So the next question would be, even if ethical evaluations for part 2 are national, as we all know, it would be very interesting if European ethics committees could be in relation. French ECs would be very interested in talking with other UECs. I don't know, maybe you, Christophe, can address this particular question?
Yes, thanks, Stephanie. I think it's actually a very good question. The clinical trial regulation defines a process up until member state level. So it defines how a clinical trial application should be submitted to a member state in order to achieve a decision, a final authorization to start a clinical trial. How the process is going within a given member state is completely up to that member state. So involvement of ethics committees and national competent authorities is up to each member state to consider. This being said, in the part 2 evaluation, we have, of course, standard ethics committees, and the regulation acknowledges that this is a national matter, so it needs to be solved at the national level. So although there would be a lot of sense in creating structures between ethics committees, the regulation does not put that in place. It puts in place discussions and interactions between member states and not between ethics committees. I might add, though, that at the moment we have, and it's our objective to keep it that way, we have exchanges platforms with national competent authority representatives and ethics committee representatives in the clinical trial expert group at commission level, and we intend to make it that way in order to keep the work on potential templates, the work on potential harmonization, even for those aspects that are national, to keep that work running. So I hope that's a good answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Christophe. I have a next question. Following the last CTIS sponsored training, we discussed the question whether it will be possible to transfer data present in the UDRA-CT database to the CTIS. If an already approved and running trial needs to be transferred, will there be some kind of transfer button or the possibility to upload relevant data from the UDRA-CT XML file? Or will everything have to be entered manually? I think this question can go to Laura, maybe?
Yes,
yes.
No, it's similar to a point that we discussed during the previous meeting. So in terms of CTIS functionalities, we are still working on the requirements and how the functionality will work exactly to enable this transition. So we do not have details at this stage on the exact functionality. Regarding the requirements for the documentation is more for the member states part, and as Fatima said, it is under discussion at the CTFG. So basically the transition phase will occur. We know that there is a 3 years transition period. If trials have not ended by the end of these 3 years, they will have to be transitioned, and more details on this functionality for CTIS will be provided later on. We cannot say exactly if will be by clicking a button that the transition will be and how this will happen in practice, because we are still working on the specification.
Thank you, Laura. So my next question would be, if an organization outside the EU, would like to submit a clinical trial in the EU, will this organization have access to the CTIS? The person would really be grateful if we could give her or him more information on that point, on that particular point. I think I can ask maybe this question to Laura, Christophe eventually.
Laura?
Yeah, I start. Okay, may I start?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Christophe, how you prefer? No, just briefly to say, but I'm sure Christophe will complement that according to the regulation, yes, it's possible for a sponsor that is not based, non-European sponsors to submit an application, but they need to have a legal representative. So it's mandatory to capture in the system, in the CTIA, in the part 1. Actually, this was shown in the clips. That there is a dedicated section for the legal representative, and this has to be populated when the sponsor is not based in the EU. So they need to have, nevertheless, a representative in the EU.
Nothing to add from my side, Laura. That's a perfect answer. There's no limitations of people accessing CTIS. There is an obligation, though, to define responsibilities at European level. So correct.
Christophe, while I have you on the line, there was a question on mononational. I think that you saw passing. Maybe you can address it before I forget.
Thanks. Yes.
Sorry, because I don't find it, and I want you to address it because I know that you are not in the second part of the Q&A today, so that I don't miss that information.
Yeah, thank you. No, the clinical trial regulation, at the moment it was elaborated, wanted to make one single platform for clinical trial authorizations in Europe. So it does not make any difference between a mononational trial in one member state in one site or a multinational trial in the 27 member states in 5 sites per member state. Every clinical trial that adheres to the definition should be submitted through CTIS and should go through the same application process. Of course, from a practical stance, a mononational trial will have some more easier processes than a multinational one. I'm thinking, for instance, on the selection of the reference member states. That would be a little bit easier if you only have one member state there. But the system and the regulation applies for every clinical trial, albeit mononational or multinational. Thanks.
Thank you, Christophe. The next question would be, how do you add third parties in the CTIS? Maybe I can ask this to Laura, Peter, or yes?
Yes, this was also part of the clips, so you can replay and see this again, because as we mentioned, these clips are available from the EMA website, so you can see exactly to the section that I'm referring to. In the part 1, under the sponsor details, there is a drop-down list when the user can add contact point in the union, scientific and public contact point, and then there is a line that says third parties. So by clicking in that section, the sponsor can add the details of a CRO, of a clinical research organization that is used in the conduct of the trial, and specify which tasks have been delegated to that CRO.
Good, thank you. My next question would be, is there a way to upload the list of sites and investigator other than manually? Maybe Laura, again to you. Sorry for that. You have a lot of questions today.
No, it's fine, thanks. Unfortunately not, meaning that the functionality to add the site is also what we have seen in the clips. So the site details are sitting in the part 2, and the details of the clinical investigator site are taken from OMS. So you have seen in the clip that the user is searching in OMS first, is retrieving the details of the site, and then is providing manually the details of the principal investigator, so the name, surname, and the contact details. And then they have to upload the documents. So this is how is envisaged at the moment, with the search of the details in OMS, the population of the PI details, and then the documentation is per member state. So all the slots for the documents that have to be provided for that member state.
Good, thank you, Laura. My next question will be the following. Will a test site be available before the ctis goes live? It would be very useful so we could get used to the system before we have to do a real clinical trial application. Maybe I can ask this to Fia or Peter eventually to let us know.
Thank you. Let's see if Peter wants to complement. So ctis is currently being built, and there are still some functionalities that need to be developed. So we need to wait still for the system to mature. We are currently thinking about how we might be able to make some sort of test environment available, but that's in the conceptualization phase. So at the moment, we don't have promises as to what it might be looking like. But we are considering for sure something and see how we could possibly make that available before go live. But it would require, before looking into the system, it really would require also to get familiar with all the materials that we have been making available, so that there is a very good understanding for how the system will behave. Thank you.
Thank you, Fia. I don't know, Peter, if you want to add something or it's fine. If not, I go to the next question. Okay, so another question would be, can you start preparing the submission in the system and complete it another day? For instance, start populating information in the system and finalize another day. Maybe Laura, I can.
Yes, it's possible to create the application whenever is best for the sponsor to populate. So they can work on the application, they can save it, they can continue working on it in the following days. As I mentioned, when it's in draft, an application is only visible to the sponsor users. So they are the only ones. They can see what they're working on, and they can take all the time that they need to populate the different sections. Once they submit the application, having completed all the mandatory fields, then they make it available to the member states. I was going through the questions, Stephanie, maybe I'll add one point on the previous point that we were discussing for OMS, because for the trial side, because I have seen there are quite a few questions on the same point. What happens if the site is not in OMS? So OMS is the organization management system when we capture all the details of the organization. So ideally, the sponsor should be able to search and select and find the organization from there. Nevertheless, if the site is not there, there is a functionality implemented in ctis that enables the sponsor user to create a brand new site and a brand new organization on the spot when completing the application. So this has been implemented not for you to be stuck and blocked by the fact that the site or the details were not available in OMS. So you will see that there is a button, new organization, you can create it while you are populating the application form, and then the request goes directly to OMS. So this was done really with the intention to facilitate the population of the application form. At the same time, you can create a new organization that then will be subject to the validation rules of the OMS team at the EMA, and then continue with the submission. I hope this clarifies, because we have seen few questions around this point.
Christoph, I see that you are willing to reply to a question from the chat, so you are more than welcome. It's the question on non-substantial modification that you saw passing, so I will give you the word there.
Thank you. No, I was really eager to answer on this one. The question was, will there be a list of what non-substantial modifications can be? And actually, I'm quite proud of the work that was done over the last couple of months between member states, us as a commission, and some representatives from sponsor organizations and CROs, to define in very much detail what could be a substantial modification, what could be changed to be submitted through the Article 81.9 process, so the changes relevant for supervision, and what could be a non-substantial modification. So I want to make some publicity here today for the newly published question and answer document in volume 10. I already put the link in some of the answers I responded, but I would urge people that have questions on what is a substantial modification, what is not in the new regulation, to take a look at specifically Annex 3 of those Q&As, which has a very, very large amount of examples to say this is something that could be substantial, this is something that could not be substantial. This all being said, and how proud I am on that document, the finality remains that it's up to a sponsor to decide what is a non-substantial change, what is a substantial change. They can contact national authorities, national contact points if they're not sure of this. But of course, we hope that the lists and the work that was done can already help to guide sponsors in the right direction. Last word on this. This is a work in progress. We're working, for instance, also with the quality working party and the biologicals working party to define more on the quality side what will be substantial and what not. So work in progress that I hope will be finalized by the end of the year, or at least in January 22.
Thank you, Christoph. In case you notice another question that you would like to address, because then you leave, let me know, because I may miss important questions that you could answer today. So our next question would be, would a model of cover letter be provided, or each sponsor will use its own model, let's say it like that? Maybe I can address this to Laura or Fatima, or
well, I must say that at the moment we don't have models for the content for for a cover letter. What is need to be respected, it's the content of the cover letter. So more important than the format of the cover letter, it's the content. And indeed, this information, it's really important when you start assessing the trial to have an overview of the main characteristics of the trial, if this is a first-in-human, if this is a pediatric trial. Even this information is in the structured data. But at the moment, we don't have any templates for a cover letter. I don't know if maybe Laura wants to add something. Thanks.
Well, I think no. So I will move to the next one. Is it known what languages member state? Yes?
I think it was muted. Sorry.
Sorry. As I heard the silence, I thought that you didn't want to add something. So I let you add.
I'm mute. Okay, now it's on. Thank you, Fatima. Indeed, as you said, we do not have the template for the cover letter. I just wanted to mention that for other documents, there are templates, and maybe this is also an interesting information for the audience. They are actually in the UDRALEX volume 10. So for some of the documents that will be uploaded in ctis, there is already a template, but as Fatima already said, for the cover letter, we do not have.
Okay. So I will come back to the other question I had. Is it known what languages member state will want the application? So likely submission will need to be done in different languages. So maybe I can ask this to Christoph?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. I already answered to some people in the chat, directing them to the volume 10 question and answer, because since January of this year, there is in Annex 2 of that document a list per member state which describes which documents will be accepted in English, and if not, in which language those documents, at least for the part 1, should be submitted. Just a small anecdote on this one, that is a new addition to that Q&A. That was actually the result of one question of one part of the audience of a previous session we did in September. Just to point out to people that asking questions can lead to answers being published in the Q&A. So all the questions on languages, I would say, take a look to the Q&A. I acknowledge that not every country is in there, but the majority of them is, and the majority of them have really given detail on what a language can and should be used, at least for the part 1 submission. Thanks.
Okay, and then I have a really last question. For the substantial modification type part 1 and part 2, do we submit both parts together or one at a time? Maybe Laura, because you introduced to us this today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes. Substantial modification is with the scope part 1 and part 2, then can be submitted together. It's entirely up to the sponsor how they wish to progress with the submission of the SEM, but if the scope covers part 1 and the part 2, CTIS supports the functionality to submit in one application, include both parts.
Good. Thank you a lot, Laura. So I see that according to the agenda, we will have now a 10 minutes break so that we can change a little bit our ideas. So I will ask everybody to be back maybe at 3:30 so that we can start with session 2. Thank you a lot.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice break and got a little bit of coffee or tea or something else. We will continue with the second session of this afternoon, and the first speaker we have for that is Stephanie Kromar. So we are going to speak about sponsor activities during the life cycle of a clinical trial, with specific focus on submission of notifications. We know Stephanie from before. Please, Stephanie, go ahead.
Thank you, Fia. So yes, as Fia said, one of the important things that we will need to do under the regulation is to submit notifications, and I want to show you a little bit so that you have a taste of what we will need to submit under the regulation, so that you have a taste of that. So first, to start with, I would like to explain a little bit what is a notification, and as well the types of notifications that we will face under the regulation. So something important to know is that notifications allow sponsors to notify member states about relevant events that will occur during the conduct of a clinical trial. This notification can be classified or categorized in two main groups. We have what we call the trial and recruitment period notifications. Most of these notifications will be executed in all trials as they refer to clinical trial life cycle. And then we have a second group, which are what we call the other notifications. And under this group, we find the unexpected events, the serious breaches, the urgent safety measures, the third country inspectorate inspections. And these notifications are only needed in certain circumstances that were not per se foreseen by the protocol. But now I would like to be more in deep in one and the other category. So we will start with the first category, which are the trial and recruitment period. So in this category, this trial and recruitment period notification will enable the sponsor to inform member states concerned of critical moments during the conduct of a clinical trial. Some of them are needed in certain circumstances, whereas others are per se mandatory. One important thing to know is that such notification must be made within 15 days from the start of the event. So that's something really to take into account. Among these category, we find the start of trial, the start of recruitment, the end of recruitment, and the end of trial. So what do we mean by start of the trial notification? So by that, we mean that we need to notify about the first act of recruitment of a potential subject for a specific clinical trial. It could be eventually the date of initiation of the clinical trial in the first site, or the date when the first study-specific advertisement is published. The start of recruitment notification is the first visit of the first subject that needs to be notified. The recruitment, as we know, shall begin within 2 years from the date of authorization of the clinical trial. If an extension to start the recruitment is needed beyond these 2 years that are allowed by the regulation, the sponsor will need to submit a substantial modification in order to have this extension granted. Then we have what we call the end of recruitment notification. That is the act of not recruiting subjects anymore in a member state concerned. And then we have the notification of end of trial. That's the last visit of the last subject or a later point in time, but this needs to be then defined in the protocol clearly. So I just want to reinsist on the fact that today, for giving you an example, under the end of trial notification, we have maybe 90 days, but now it will move to 15 days within 15 days. So that's important to note here. So if I could go, thank you. Then we have 3 other types of notification that fall also under this category is the temporary halt, the restart of the trial, and the restart of recruitment. So this notification will allow to interrupt a clinical trial and on specific grounds, and to eventually restart it afterwards if needed or if required. A temporary halt notification is an interruption not provided in the protocol, so it's not defined in the protocol. And there are 2 types depending whether the notification is related to a matter of subject safety and or benefit risk balance or not. Then we have what we call the restart of the trial notification. That's the act of restarting the trial after a temporary halt or after a suspension of the clinical trial by a member state concerned. Depending on the circumstances, substantial modification may be needed to be submitted and authorized in order to restart your trial. And then we have what we call the notification of restart of recruitment, and that's the act of restarting the recruitment of subject. And the trial, of course, should have been restarted by a notification before we restart the recruitment. I want to insist that all these notifications that I'm explaining here, or everything is done in the portal. So as we already explained during the first session, everything is done through the portal. So there is no communication in parallel of the ctis. So if I can, yes. And then we have the second category, so the other notifications, as I explained in the first slide. And then we find 4 types. We have the serious breaches. These are defined in Article 52 of the CT regulation, and these notifications must be made no later than 7 days from the date on which the sponsor became aware of the breach. And so these notifications will allow the sponsor to inform about a breach likely to affect the safety and right of a subject, or the reliability and robustness of the data generated in the clinical trial. The third country inspectorate inspection, these are defined in Article 53 so that you know from where it comes and you can go and look for more information. These type of notifications will enable the sponsor to submit all inspections report of third countries authorities concerning a clinical trial. We have then the urgent safety measures. These needs to be notified to the member state concerned within 7 days from the date the measures were taken. We know today that there are some discrepancies under the directive with terms of timelines regarding the notifications of urgent safety measures, which will now be harmonized, and for all countries it will be 7 days. You can have more information about urgent safety measure under the Article 54. And this notification, of course, will allow the sponsor to inform whether an expected event is likely to seriously affect the benefit-risk balance and the USMs which have been taken in order to protect the patient safety. And then as for category that falls within this group, we have the unexpected event. Such notification needs to be declared within no later than 15 days from the date the sponsor became aware of the event. You can find information under the Article 53 of the regulation, and this particular notification will allow the sponsor to inform the member state concerned about any unexpected event that might materially influence the benefit risk assessment of the medicinal product, or that would lead to changes in the administration of a medicinal product or in overall the conduct of a clinical trial. So like that, you have a little panorama of the types of notifications that we will need to notify through the portal to the member state concerned. So yes, a last slide that I forgot. So it's important to know that there is what we call the ad hoc assessment that will enable member state concerned to assess the information related to, here I'm presenting notification, so to, for instance, related to a notification in this case, or eventually an IMP or any other information relevant to the supervision of the trial. Such type of assessment, so such type of ad hoc assessment may be generated in two situations. Assessment related to a notification, like we saw just now, temporary halt, serious breaches, unexpected event, or urgent safety measure, or assessment related to other aspects of a clinical trial. But what I wanted to highlight here is that during this process, the member states may request information to the sponsor through the RFI functionality. So they can, through the request for information, request further information on a point that it's not clear to them. So now I would like to show you two videos, so little videos about these two types of notification that I just introduced to you, so that you can have a look on how these are managed in the ctis.
This video outlines in short the main features of the trial and recruitment periods section in the notification tab, found in any clinical trial. It explains the notification functionality and how to manage the notifications related to the trial and recruitment periods. The Notifications tab can be found in each clinical trial in both sponsor and authority workspaces. Sponsors use the tab to notify the member states concerned of important milestones such as the start or the end of the trial and events that might affect the clinical trial. All buttons found in the Notifications tab become active once the clinical trial is authorized. On top of the Notifications tab, you can see the Trial and Recruitment Periods section. In this section, you can see 7 buttons, the MSCs of the clinical trial and the status of the trial to each one of them. With the Start button, you can notify the respective MSC that the clinical trial has started. Select Bulgaria and click on the Start button. In the pop-up form, insert the start date and add any related document. You cannot select future dates. Click on the Submit button and confirm the submission of the notification. In the Trial Details table, the start date for Bulgaria is populated. On the right side of the Trial and Recruitment Periods section, you can see the buttons that are associated with the recruitment. Select Bulgaria and click on the Start Recruitment button. Pick up the starting date of the recruitment from the calendar and add any relevant document. Click on the Submit button and confirm the start of the recruitment. The start day of the recruitment appears on the table. Use the End Recruitment button to stop it. Select the end date, add any documents if applicable and submit the notification. You can restart the recruitment by using the Restart Recruitment button if needed. The sponsor can halt the clinical trial temporarily by using the Temporary Hold button. Select the MSc in which you need to pause the trial and click on the Halt Temporarily button. Fill in the details in the pop-up form and attach the relevant documents if needed. In the fourth field, you are asked whether the halt is related to subject safety and/or change in the benefit-risk balance of the trial. Select No and continue with the rest fields, filling in the necessary details. Click on the Submit button and confirm the submission of the notification. The change is reflected on the trial details table. The selected date for the temporary halt appears on the table while the current status changes to halted. Since the temporary halt is not related to safety and/or a change of the benefit-risk balance, you can restart the clinical trial by just using the Restart Trial button. Select the halted trial and click on the Restart Trial button. In the pop-up form, fill in the necessary details. Click on the Submit button and confirm the submission of the notification. The status changes back to authorized and the respective date appears in the Restart column of the table. In order to restart a trial that is halted due to safety issues, you need to submit a substantial modification and have it authorized before you restart the trial. For more information, you may visit the e-learning of this module. Last, you can use the End Trial button to notify the MSc that the trial has ended. Select Bulgaria's trial and click on the End Trial button. Select the end date from the calendar. Fill in the details in the rest fields of the pop-up form and click on the Submit button. Confirm the submission of the notification. The end date appears on the table. By clicking on the country link, you can go to the notifications trial history for that MSc. For more information on the notifications trial history, you may visit the e-learning. Each time you submit a notification, a notice is generated in the Notices and Alerts tab. The same happens in the Authority workspace. Notices are created each time that a notification is submitted. This video outlines in short the main features of the Notifications tab, found in any clinical trial. It includes the various types of notifications, how to create a notification, and the various action buttons found in each notification. Besides the notifications related to the trial and recruitment periods that were presented in the first clip of this module, there are other types of notifications that sponsors might be submitting during the period in which a clinical trial is conducted. Sponsors can submit notifications for unexpected events, serious breaches, urgent safety measures and third country inspectorate inspections in dedicated spaces for each type. With the plus New button, you can create a new notification. Click on the button, and in the pop-up form, fill in the necessary fields. Once you finish with the details of the notification, scroll down and you will see 4 button in the end of the form. You can click on the Close button to discard the notification, or the Save button to save it as a draft, or the Submit button to submit your notification. The Cancel button is inactive and cannot be used to this stage. Click on the Save button. A message on the upper right corner informs you that the draft had been saved, while the notification is listed in the dedicated area for unexpected events. In the table of the sections for unexpected events and serious breaches, 5 notifications have been listed while basic details such as the submission date and the status are visible. 3 of them have been saved as drafts and the other 2 have been already submitted. On the right side of the tables, in the Actions column, you can see various buttons for each notification. Click on the eye icon to view the details of the notification. In the notification for unexpected event 1 in draft status, click on the pencil icon to edit the details of the notification. You can edit the fields or attach additional documents if needed. In the end of the form you can click on the Cancel button to discard the notification. Click on the Cancel Draft button. A message on the right upper corner informs you that the draft was cancelled. The notification has been removed from the table. click on the pencil icon of the unexpected event 2 in draft status. In the end of the form, you can click on the Save button to save it again as a draft. Or you can click on the Submit button to submit the notification. Click on the Submit button and confirm the submission of the notification. The status of the notification changes to Submitted. In the submitted notification, click on the pencil icon to update the details of the notification. Edit the necessary fields and insert the justification for the update. Click on the Update button in the end of the form and confirm the update. With the update of the notification, an additional button appears that enables you to view the previous versions. Click on the small arrow next to the Versions button to access the previous version. With the Withdraw button, you can withdraw a notification that has been submitted. Click on the Withdraw button. Insert the justification, click on the Confirm Withdraw button. The status changes to withdrawn and only the View button appears on the action column. A submitted notification is not deleted if you withdraw it. The status changes, but it is still visible.
Thank you a lot. I hope like that you could have some theoretical and also practical examples on the notifications. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you for being with us for this talk as well. We know you work as a Senior Regulatory Affairs Manager at EORTC and being busy there, but thank you very much for contributing. So for the next, we will have Andrea Seidel-Gletzer, who's coming from the Coordination Center for Clinical Trials in Heidelberg, and where she is heading the project management and is also a member of the executive board. So Andrea will help us to understand the submission of trial results and approach to layperson summaries. Andrea, please.
Yes, thank you, Pia. Thanks for the nice introduction. And I hope you all can hear me well. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to a brief introduction of the reporting of clinical results and also the layperson summary in CTIS. I know that this is a topic of some importance for a lot of us, and I hope you will be able to see the benefits or some of the benefits that CTIS will bring on this issue to our work. So if we have a look on this slide, actually we did not do a really good job in our reporting obligations as academia because we only submitted a really low number of clinical trials to the European Union Clinical Trials Register before. So this was something that was raised in the last years, and we have the problem that we have two reporting obligations. We have the reporting obligations on a national level on one hand, and the processes that lie behind there. And we also have reporting obligations on a European level. And yeah, we failed to meet them. 70% of industry-sponsored trials were reported, but only 11% of academic sponsored trials were reported. So up to date, we see on the next slide that all over Europe, academia is struggling to catch up with the existing reporting obligations and to meet them. And I think we had a lack of awareness on these reporting obligations in the last years. So we had reporting to different portals, like the European portal and also the national portals. Now we see a lot of university all over Europe trying to submit all the necessary data and the full data sets to the trial register, and this of course requires a lot of manpower actually. So we are trying to catch up and doing a pretty good job on this. So on the next slide we see how it is supposed to work under the new regulation, and we have
one single portal for the life cycle of a clinical trial, which offers us a lot of benefits here. As before in Article 37 of the new regulation, a summary of results of the clinical trial needs to be submitted within 1 year from the end of the trial. Summary results should include specific data and specific points which are specified in Annex 4 of the regulation. Additionally, a layperson summary will also be mandatory now, which has not been the case before. So on the next slide, we will see what the new layperson summary will need from us. So the content is outlined in Annex 5 of the regulation, and it addresses these 10 points you can see here that should be addressed in the layperson summary result reporting in an easy to understand language. There is already a recommendation from the expert group on clinical trials in place and is out as a guidance for us. So this is supposed to help authors writing these summaries. Layperson summaries are expected to be uploaded at least in the local languages of the countries the trial was conducted in. What is the purpose of the layperson summary? Well, patient engagement is actually one of the focuses of clinical research. Patients want to be seen as a partner and want to be informed about the trials they participated in. And so there's also a need to identify and understand clinical trial results and the evaluation for the relevance of the results. The summary also leads to full transparency and hopefully strengthens the confidence in clinical research. So how will this look like in CTIS? Actually, to date, there is no training material available because, as you can guess, trial reporting is a very late stage of clinical trials, and so this will be needed at a later stage, but it surely will be developed. So we have some screenshots here. As you can see, it is really easy right now. You have your trial and you go to the upper bar where you can see trial results, and you can upload all documents here in a PDF format. This is how it is supposed to work initially. Structured data will be implemented at a later stage of development. For your trial, move to trial results in the upper bar. If you go there, you will see this screen and be able to add a new document. In this part, you will be able to upload a summary of results. You will also be able to upload intermediate data analysis and also layperson summary or other clinical study reports. So this is a really easy point in the new trial regulation, as it gives us one portal where all documents will be available and all documents will be stored. So we don't have reporting to different portals anymore. And hopefully this will help all of us to conduct our daily work and to be able to meet the reporting obligations in the future. So this is it on the reporting of clinical trials and layperson summary. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And if colleagues then have questions, please put those in the chat and then we will address those later in the day. So the next talk we have is welcoming back Laura Pioppo from EMA, and she will be explaining to us about transparency and publication of clinical trial information that is contained in CTIS. Laura, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Fia. So the presentation will cover the transparency aspect and the publication rules for CTIS. As you can see in this slide, CTIS will be managed with a secure access in two different workspaces, one for the sponsor users, including industry and academia, and marketing authorization applicants, but only for the submission of the clinical study reports. And there will be a secure access in the authorities workspace that will be accessible for member states users, including NCAs and ethics committee, the European Commission and the EMA. So the users will be able to work on the documentation and perform the assessment by the login in the secure parts. The information will be stored in the database, and part, or mostly, I should say, of the information captured in the CTIS will be accessible to the general public. So there will be a publication mechanism that will enable the availability to make available the information to the general public. Of course, in this case, no access, no registration will be needed, and will be open access to the general public to the clinical trial data. So the principle for publishing the information on clinical trials is quite clear in the regulation in Article 81.4 that says that the database shall be publicly accessible unless for all or part of the data and the information contained confidentiality is justified. And then there is reference to the grounds for protecting, avoiding publication, basically on the principle to protect personal data. For protection of commercially confidential information, so CCI, or communication between the member states in relation, for example, to the preparation of an assessment report, or a protection of information for the supervision on the conduct of clinical trials. So anything that pertains to the planning of an inspection or the planning of union controls, also this should be exempted from the publication rules. So just to guide you and mention the rules that are implemented in the system that are defining the principle for disclosure, only application on which a decision, and this can be any decision, positive or negative, that has been reached by the member states concerned, will be made public. So if the application is under evaluation and is being assessed by the member states concerned, this will not be made public. The publication point starts when a decision has been issued by the first member state concerned that has received the application. All data and documents in CTIS will be made public, with few exceptions. And the default is always to make public at the first opportunity. So in case of a clinical trial application being submitted, the first opportunity would be the time of the decision, for example. Nevertheless, the sponsor have the option to defer the timing of publication of data and documents, and the member states will have the chance to evaluate the proposal that is made by the sponsor. So when completing an application form, and we have seen it in the first clip under the form section, the sponsor can choose if they want to apply for a deferral mechanism and delay the publication of the clinical trial data. So the deferral rules and the maximum timelines to defer the publication depends on the trial category, because of course, not all the clinical trials are the same, and depending on the trial phase and the development phase of the product in the trial, then the delay for the publication can be applied. So you can see category 1 trials are the one for phase 1 trials, category 2 are the one for phase 2 and phase 3, and category 3 trials are the phase 4 trials. All this classification and more details on the deferral rules can be seen in the document that is published on the EMA website, that is the appendix on the disclosure rules to the functional specification of the portal and the database. So this document that is mentioned here at the end of the slide is available on the public website and really gives a clear breakdown of the different timing for publication depending on the trial category. So this is a summary, is taken, of course, the concept and the rules are the ones defined in the appendix on disclosure, but is a tabular presentation of the rules that are also implemented in the system. So you can see that there is a set of data and documents that can be, for which the publication can be deferred. But of course, this will depend on the category of the trial. So for category 1 trials, meaning first in human, bioequivalence, bioavailability, or pharmacokinetics and dynamics trials, biosimilarity, it's possible to defer quite a substantial number of clinical trial information, and you can see them listed. So main characteristics, notification even, subject information sheets, the plate, the protocol information, the IMPD, safety and efficacy, the responses to the RFI, and so on. Category 2 trials are the phase 2 and 3. So for this one, you can see that a smaller number of documents, a smaller number of information can be deferred, and the same applies for the category 3 trials that are the phase 4. So for this, only the protocol, the IMPD, and the responses to the RFI can be published later on. Also, the maximum period of time for the deferral changes depending on the trial category. So we have a maximum of 7 years for category 1, a maximum of 5 years for category 2, and up to the publication of summary of results for category 3. What is important to clarify here is that the sponsor make a proposal for the deferral, for the delay of the publication when completing the application form, and they will provide a justification and reasoning why they apply. This, of course, will be subject to the evaluation and the assessment by the member states concerned once they receive the application. So this is a screenshot that is taken from the system, is showing the deferral mechanism for a category 1 trial. So you can see that quite a lot of information can be deferred, and the main characteristics are flagged in red because we can clarify better what is meant with main characteristics. So these are one of the parameters that can be delayed, for which the publication can be delayed, together with the documentation that you can see, also listed here, but more in detail, what do we mean with main characteristics that can be deferred for a category 1 trials? There is a list in the next slide. So the main characteristics, and this is a non-exhaustive list, but still to give you an idea, are the essential identifiers of the trial and information that can be give details on the trial type and the design of the trial. So the title of the trial, the therapeutic intent and trial design, main objective, secondary objective, endpoints, inclusion and exclusion criteria, treatment arms, details on the investigational medicinal product that is used. All these fall under the grouping of main characteristics. And for category 1 trials that are considered more sensitive, let's say, it's possible to apply for a deferral for the publication of this information by ticking the main characteristics section. Of note, the deferral of the main characteristic is only possible for category 1 trial. Next one, please. So there are some fields that are in any case published. So even in case a deferral has been requested by the sponsor, so to delay the publication, there is some information that in any case will be made available in the system. So here you can see the list, the clinical trial number, the details of the sponsor, the name and address, the nature of the trial, the decision outcome, when a decision was issued by the member states concerned, when the trial started and the recruitment started, or when the trial has ended, and also details on the principal investigator and the suitability of the facility. So these fields are always going to be published in the public database, regardless of the trial category and regardless if deferrals were applied or not. Next one, please. So now we have some screenshots that are taken from the public website of the CTIS, just to give you a flavor and an idea of how it will look like, the publication, in case there are deferrals applied for a particular clinical trial, or in case there are not. So in this case, you can see a category 1 trial with no deferral. So you can see the trial number, you can see that the trial is ongoing and recruiting, and you can see the title. You can see the medical condition under the section condition, the conditions to be treated, and also the decision date issued by the member states. And in the next slide, thank you, you can see even more details. So you can see the phase of the trial, you can see the therapeutic area, the sponsor details, the member state details, if it's a low interventional or not. So quite a substantial amount of information is available to the general public if deferrals are not requested and being granted by the member states concerned. In the next slide, what we can see is how the publication will look like for a trial for which a deferral has been requested on the main characteristics, and the amount of information that is published is much less. You can see that the trial title is not visible. In this case, we can only see the trial number and the status that is ongoing and recruiting, but not the trial number. We cannot see the medical condition. And in the next slide, you can see that less is displayed in the table. So we cannot see the condition, we cannot see the therapeutic area, we cannot see the population type. So only part of the information is displayed, and the publication of the rest is basically delayed up to the point in time that has been chosen by the sponsor and agreed by the member states concerned when assessing the application. Next one, please. Is important, very important to clarify that there are some data and documents that will never be subject to publication rules. So here you can see also this is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an understanding, all the quality related information, so the IMPD quality, if there are RFI requests for information that have been raised by the member states concerned during the assessment, and the responses to the RFI related to quality will not be published, as well as the assessment report. So the draft and the final assessment report for quality will not be published. Also, any draft assessment report actually will not be published also if they pertain to different parts of the application. So anything that is draft and is an exchange of information between the member states during the evaluation phase will be exempted from the publication rules. Only the final assessment reports are published. Then documents which may contain personal data that are not for publication, so personal data of the sponsor staff or the marketing authorization applicant or details of member states experts, if any of these needs to be provided in the system, then will not be published. You will see that there is a slot of documents not for publication where this information can be provided, and also the financial arrangement between the sponsor and the investigator sites. Also, these will be exempted from the publication rules. Next one, please. So, yes, these are some screenshots that are taken from the system to show the implemented functionalities that enable, for example, the protection of personal data. So for the cover letter, in this case, is a screenshot that has been taken for the cover letter, but really we have this functionality implemented across the system for all the documents that can be published. There is the possibility for the sponsor users to upload a version of the documents that is for publication, and then you can see below a version that is not for publication, is written in brackets. Hopefully you can read it. So having two versions of the documents gives the possibility to the sponsor user to upload a version of the document that might contain personal data if this is required, because really personal data should be kept to the minimum. But for example, if the cover letter or other documents that will have to be signed, they can be provided in the slot not for publication, and then the sponsor should be responsible to provide a version for publication that does not contain personal data and that can be subject to the publication rules. Next one, please. This is to show you how it looks like instead when an IMPD-Q, so the quality IMPD is uploaded in the system, the sponsor user can see that is written in red, this document will not be publicly accessible. So it's clear to the user when they complete the dossier, when they populate the form, that some of the documents will not be subject to the publication rules. Next one, please. This is taken from the public website, so from the public register of the CTIS, how will be presented to the users when documents have been deferred, so are not yet published at the time when the clinical trial application is on the public domain. The user will see this message, there are no documents attached, and we know this, maybe this text will need some revision because it doesn't really give a clear understanding that the documents are provided, it's just that they're not displayed. So this has already been noted, and we will make the text even more clear to the user, but in practice, the user will be able to open the section and just will see that the protocol is not displayed. When the timing for the publication will be reached, then the document will be made available to the general public. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Laura. Colleagues, we will go on a short break and be back at 4:20 for the last session of the day, including then a panel discussion as well, based on the questions that you have posed. So back at 4:20. Thank you. A very warm welcome back for the last session of the day. So we will kick off immediately, and we will have Stephanie Kromer talking to us about work planning and management tools in CTIS. Stephanie, please.
Yes, thank you, Fia. So if you could, Barbara, go to the next slide. Yes. So CTIS supports sponsor users. As you know from the session we had today, you can realize now that the CTIS will support us in compiling, recording, submitting clinical trials data. These activities will be supported with 3 workload management functionalities that we will see in the next slide. So just for you to understand well, we can do 3 main tasks as sponsor: to compile, record, and submit data for our clinical trials. We can respond to RFIs that will be sent to us by the member state concerned. And of course, as I explained in my previous presentation, we can also submit to member states concerned notifications. So if we go to the next one, so it's important to highlight the fact that CTIS will offer 2 general workload management functionalities, which are notices and alerts and RFIs, and then one that we call specific workload management functionality, which is what we call the timetable. But what are they? So notices and alerts will enable to monitor messages that will be triggered following the occurrence of events that may occur during the life cycle of a clinical trial. And these notices and alerts will be viewed by the sponsor or eventually the marketing authorization holders, depending on the permissions and roles that you have, as explained by Anna on the first session. The RFIs will enable the user to access the request from member states concerned about information that needs to be clarified in the context of validation and assessment of a clinical trial application, ad hoc assessment, or corrective measures, or eventually still annual safety reports. And who can view this? It's the sponsors. And then we have a third, the specific workload management functionality, which is the timetable. And this timetable, what we'll do is to enable to monitor the completed phases of a clinical trial application and the projected dates by which the remaining phases will be completed or needs to be completed. And who can view this? That's the sponsors. So let's go a little bit in deep in the notices and alerts. What are notices? These are messages that are generally of informative nature. the notices are messages that will inform users of any event that will be occurring during the life cycle of the clinical trial in which sponsor is involved, of course. So, for instance, application was submitted, substantial modification was submitted, so it just has informative nature. Then you have, on the other hand, what we call the alerts. This will trigger an action from the sponsor side. For instance, you need to reply to a request for information and you have 2 days remaining, for instance. So these alerts will really need an action from the sponsor side. So if we go to the next slide, yes. And then we have the RFIs. So you have what we call the clinical trial application RFIs and the clinical trial RFIs. Among the clinical trial application RFIs, you have the validation and assessment. These are RFIs that will be raised during the evaluation of an initial clinical trial application, but also an assessment of an application for substantial modification or an assessment of an application for a subsequent addition of member state concern. Then we have the ad hoc assessment RFIs. These are RFIs that will be raised to request additional information to the sponsor as part of an ad hoc assessment. We have also what we call the corrective measures RFIs, which will be raised to request the sponsor opinion before a member state concern will apply a corrective measure if needed or not. And then we have the annual safety reporting RFIs that are raised during the assessment of an RSI that is prepared by the sponsor and submitted to member state concerns. And these are what we call then the annual safety reporting RSIs. If we go to the next table, yes. So then we have what we call the timetable. So you will see in the CTIS there is this particular section that will allow users to monitor the progress of the assessment of a particular clinical trial application by displaying the actual completion date of each phase of the assessment and the expected completion date of the remaining ones. So unfortunately, I don't have a screenshot of how it looks like, but basically you will see that you have in this timetable all the stages that a clinical trial goes through, the validation, the part 1, part 2, and of course the decision phase. And by this timetable, you will know where you stand with regards to your submission of the application. So if we go through the next one, and indeed, I wanted just to highlight the phases. Of course, you have the validation phase. The validation phase will start with the submission of the clinical trial application dossier and the request of the RMS, so by the sponsor in the case of multinational trials, and it will end with the final validation of the application by the member state concerned, and in case of multinational clinical trial application, so in which you have more than one member state involved, by the RMS. The part 1 is the assessment of part 1 start with the initial assessment by the RMS and the draft assessment report sent to the all member state concerned. And after the member state concerned submit their consideration, these are consolidated in a final report of the assessment of part 1 of a clinical trial application. You have also the assessment of part 2 that entails that the individual national assessment of each member state concerned will be done. This assessment includes, of course, the informed consent, the subject recruitment, and other particular documents that will be evaluated by part 2, that means nationally. And then you have the decision, of course, after part 1 and part 2 are assessed, a notice of a single decision by each of the member states will be sent to the sponsor via the CTIS. So all these stages you will be able to see them in the timetable that is available on the CTIS. And then if we move to the next slide, I want to show you a short video about the RFIs.
This video outlines in short the main features of the Request for Information, or RFI tab, that is found in the sponsor workspace. It shows how you can monitor incoming requests, how you can search for and sort for RFIs, and how to respond to an RFI. The RFI tab can be found only in the sponsor workspace. It helps the user to view and work on incoming requests. The RFI tab lists all the requests for information that are sent from the member states to the sponsors during the validation or the assessment of a clinical trial application, the assessment of an annual safety report, the clarification raised as part of an ad hoc assessment, or an opinion request before applying a corrective measure. There are two ways for the sponsors to monitor the incoming RFIs: the Notices and Alerts tab, and the RFI tab. In the Notices and Alerts tab, you will receive a message each time an RFI has been submitted, informing you that an action needs to be taken upon the received request. You can also use the RFI tab to monitor the incoming RFIs. Within both the Notices and Alerts and the RFI tab, there are search and sorting features to facilitate users' workload management. More specifically, the search functionalities on top of the screen will help you to identify specific RFIs from the RFI tab. You can use the basic search on the left side, for which you are asked to fill in the ID of the clinical trial, the RFI, the ad hoc assessment, or the corrective measure. In the advanced search functionality, you can retrieve particular RFIs by populating various criteria, such as the due date of the task or the status. For example, by inserting the value pending in the status field criterion and clicking on the search button, you retrieve all the pending requests. Out of 38 RFIs, 4 are still pending. Scroll down to view them. The sort functionality allows you to sort the listed RFIs according to various criteria. By sorting the 4 pending RFIs according to the due date, you can prioritize them by bringing on top those that are close to their due date and act upon them before they expire. Find the RFI you need to work on and click on the gray label with its status. You will be redirected on the working area for the RFI. Depending on the content in which the RFIs were raised, different actions are possible for the sponsor user. The space of the RFI you selected to work on has been expanded. Use the lock button to be able to work on each field. Click on the Change Application button if you intend to introduce changes to the dossier of the application as part of the RFI response. Below, use the Add Document button to attach supporting documents, if needed. Scroll down to the area of the considerations. Click on the Lock button to be able to work on the fields and to respond to each one of the considerations. The Submit Response button is deactivated. Type your response to the respective field. You can always use the Add Document button to upload documents to support your response to the respective consideration. Once you complete your response, click on the Save button to activate the Submit Response button. Submit the response by clicking on the enabled respective button and then on the Confirm button. Your response will be sent, while a message will appear on the top right corner. The RFI status will change into Responded. More details on RFIs will be given in a dedicated module.
Thank you a lot for following this presentation.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And we have concluded the talks and video clips of the day. We have a panel discussion, so if I could ask colleagues who are in the panel to be alert, and then we will start to look at the questions that we have received in the chat. So thank you very much, everyone who's placed questions for us. And today we were also looking at having the commission with us in the end of the day. However, that's not possible. So in the case that there would be any questions that still would need to be answered by the European Commission, then we will take those back and feed them back to Christoph Bonarens, who with apologies couldn't be with us in the panel today. So then we have seen and been introduced already to all the panel members of the day. So I will kick off with a couple of questions that we had received. So first, in relation to the presentation from Stephanie concerning the life cycle of a clinical trial and the sponsor activities, I'll start with a simple, almost random question, Stephanie, to you. So should the first patient first visit be notified?
Yes.
That's a very short answer to a very short question. Very good, thank you. Then the other one can be a little bit more tricky, possibly. And let's see, I would first give it to Fatima. Let's see. So the question is, and there are similar questions, but I'll pick one. What do you do if you're on an adaptive trial and you don't find out the last subject has been recruited until more than 15 days after the subject has been recruited? Fatima, is this something you'd like to respond? You need to unmute yourself, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Sorry, I was not with the right position up here. Okay, so as we all know that adaptive trials, they have special characteristics. The system it's not designed for specific trials such as adaptive trials or current trials or umbrella or basket trials. The system is reflecting the regulation. So what you can do in that specific case is that to include a date, and then you may include a document. I don't know if you remember that when you are including the date, you have the possibility to include a document. So you should include the expected date and then include the document. And in the document, you may detail the specificities that are related with that specific trial that has this kind of specific characteristics, such as being an adaptive trial or other specific trial. So you can always refer to attach a document where you can go and detail a little bit more what you are going to provide.
Thank you, Fatima. Then we have a number of questions concerning some practicalities being around regarding the notifications. Are we going to receive email alerts or are we supposed to consult on a daily basis the portal? There are several questions around this. Stephanie, it was in relation to your talk, so I'll hand that question to you, please.
So can you repeat? Sorry, yeah.
Concerning the notifications, is the sponsor going to receive email alerts from CTIS, or are we, the sponsor, supposed to consult on a daily basis the portal?
So yes, unfortunately, everything happens in the CTIS portal. So whatever notification you receive will be via the notices and alerts, as I just explained before. So there is no in parallel, and you don't receive an email on top of the notices and alert that you need to check in the notices and alert tab within the CTIS.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then a follow-up to that, just to clarify. So there was another question. If then RFIs really are raised, is there functionality in CTIS to email or notify the sponsor of that? Or would you need to log into CTIS?
You will need also to log in the CTIS and go in the RFI tab, and there you will see the RFIs that were raised for your trial. And of course, also there is the notices and alert tab that will also inform you that you have received an RFI, but there is no mail sent to your attention for that.
Thank you, Stephanie. Then a couple of questions about inspections. Laura, let's see if you would be minded to look at those. So the first would be, do we also need to provide inspection reports from inspections that took place after the study was completed? Is this something for you, Laura, or is it more for Fatima? Laura?
Fatima, would you like to take this?
I can try to speak a little bit and then you just add because you are an expert in inspections. Well, what the regulation says that the member state, the sponsor really needs to provide information about third country inspections, and even the member state can ask for the translation of that specific information. So these third country inspections need to be provided by the sponsor when they are available. And then you have the other inspections that are performed by the member states, and they are coordinated, and then they are included by each member state that performed the inspection. Laura, do you want to jump in?
Indeed, no, perfect. Is exactly like this. There are two channels for the inspection. As Fatima said, if the trial is inspected by PMDA, FDA, other countries' authorities, the responsibility is for the sponsor to provide the reports. But for all the inspections that are done by the European inspectors, as Fatima was explained, is done by the member states, by the inspectors themselves. There is an inspection module where the European inspectors can capture all the details of the site and the trial inspected and provide an inspection report.
Okay, thank you, Laura and Fatima. Then perhaps talking about lay summaries, let's see who wants to take the question. There is a question about whether there is updated guidance planned for lay summaries, and this was in relation to Andrea's talk. So Andrea, would you like to start, and then perhaps Fatima can complement if necessary?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, I think Fatima is a perfect person to answer this question because she's one of the authors of this recommendation, so she will probably know if there's an update planned.
So if I understood the question is if there is any specific template for submitting late trial summaries. That's the question?
The question is whether the explicit question is whether updated guidance is planned for lay summaries. So could probably be relating to both the templates and to general guidance.
Well, I can give you the answer that and the knowledge that I have about that subject. I don't know. I don't have any information that we'll have new guidance about that. Maybe Christoph, we could address it after, because these issues of the guidance, they are discussed and planned at the CTX, so at the Commission group. What I know about the system is that when you are fulfilling the information about results, you need to include 3 types of results, which is the clinical trial results, the summary of results, and the lay summary of results. So, but the structured data, it's very few, so you just need to update the document by itself. Probably we'll have more discussion about the lay summary to have some harmonized and consistent submission of data, but I cannot say that at this moment this is under discussion. I'm not a member of the CTEC, so maybe we can address this question also with Christoph.
Thank you. Yes, we can take that question back. Sorry, there was somebody else who wanted to contribute.
Laura speaking here. Thank you, Fia. Just to mention, but probably the audience is already aware that for the time being, the only high-level guidance that is available is the one in Annex 5 of the clinical trial regulation. So this really defines, but really high-level, the contents of the layperson summary, Annex 5. A more detailed guidance, as Fatima said, is not yet available, but at least in Annex 5 there is some guidance in that regard.
Thank you. So we can move a little bit more into the area of transparency then as well. And in relation to transparency, we have a couple of questions from different angles concerning the summary of results. So one being, for instance, will an ICH E3 synopsis be acceptable for summary of results? And there is also another question of, could the summary of results be submitted in accordance with the EudraCT template? Fatima, is this something you would like to address, or shall we put it to Laura?
Do you want to jump in, Laura, and then I can complement?
Regarding the summary of results, then Annex 4 of the regulation defines high level the content. So Annex 4 is for the summary of results, and Annex 5 is for the layperson summary. As was mentioned in the presentation before, for the time being, what we have is a simple document upload. And this is for a PDF. More in details on the structure, if it would be aligned with ICH, I think is more, I don't know if we have an answer yet on the expected content yet, Fatima, I can see you.
Yeah.
You are thinking.
No, I don't have, as I said, there's a lot of discussions under CTAG at this moment. We are really preparing for the regulation. I probably imagine that these will be discussed in the future, but at this time, we don't have specific guidance for these. We have some background of work with the EUDRAC. We have some information that the sponsors are used to submit under EUDRAC, but in this case, with the system, we are expecting for now, at this moment, to have an upload document, as you were explaining, and that document should fulfill with information that it's needed for providing information about results of the trials. But we don't have any specific guidance, from my knowledge, for lay summaries or for clinical trial results.
Thank you. Then Laura and Fatima, you get a little break here. Andrea, there is a general question that we can take here in between about the reporting or non-reporting of results. And somebody has been interested to understand a little bit your views on what the major reasons might be for European academics not reporting results of clinical trials and what the barriers might be. So let's take that as a snack question and then go back to some of the content questions. Andrea.
Yes, thanks, Pia. I think this is really easy to take because I think it was majorly a lack of awareness. So academia was really not well informed about the reporting on the European level. I think we fulfilled the reporting obligations on a national level. All of us did, but we failed to do it on a European level also. So it was just primarily lack of awareness that this also needs to be done. And I think we are doing a good job catching up now and reporting all the results that are missing from academia. And I think numbers are raising up.
Numbers are certainly rising on the reporting of results from trials from academia that I think everybody has been able to see over the past months, year. So going back to transparency, then Laura, this is about the investigator's brochure and whether that will be made public as a first question.
Yes, is one of the documents that will be subject to the publication rules, although can be deferred. So the publication for certain type of documents, as we have seen in the presentation before, and some screenshots taken from the system, the sponsor can apply to delay the publication. But in principle, yes, this is one of the documents that will be published together with the rest, with the protocol, the template of the informed consent and the IMPD.
Thank you. And then a follow-up question concerning the investigator brochure that certainly will be then published. If the IB covers multiple indications, will the complete IB be made public, or can some of the sections be kept confidential? Laura.
As long as the document is uploaded, there is no such a functionality to publish only some section of a document. If a document is published in the slot for publication, we have seen how it will look like for the cover letter, but as mentioned, the functionality is the same. For every document, the sponsor will have the possibility to upload a version for publication and not for publication. If a document is uploaded in the version for publication, in its entirety, it gets published. There is a slot not for publication with the intention to protect personal data. So in these regards, so that's how it's intended to work. There is not such a feature how to select which section of a specific document should be published.
Thank you. Then we have a question about the principal investigator and the CV, and Laura, that's for you again. Is the publishing of the principal investigator CV in line with the GDPR regulation of the EU?
So the publication rules that are established in the system are the ones that are described in the transparency addendum. So the appendix on disclosure that is mentioned in the presentation that was given before. So we have implemented the publication rules according to the principle defined in the appendix on disclosure, including the publication of the principal investigator details. So the name and surname and the CV, that is one of the documents that has to be provided in the part 2. These appendix on disclosure rules have been drafted in collaboration also with the member states and endorsed by the management board, and then based on this, the ctis functionalities have been developed.
Thank you. Then there is a question about or like this: if a company supplies medication for an investigator-initiated trial, they even do not want the sponsor to be able to read the IMPD and submit this directly to ethics committee. Is this taken into account in ctis? So this is more about permissions of the system. So perhaps it's Laura or it's Stephanie.
Could you repeat the question, maybe, Fia?
Yes, I can read. I can read the question as it was put. So, if a company supplies medication for our investigator-initiated trials, they even don't want the sponsor to be able to read the IMPD and submit this directly to ethics committee. There can be a little bit, perhaps, of misunderstanding of ctis in this question. However, the question is really: is this taken into account in ctis? It relates to permissions to view IMPD information.
Yes, thank you, Fia. Indeed, as you mentioned, is exactly the point. The visibility of the data and the documents in the system is based on the profile that is given to certain users. So it means that not everybody sees the same, and also access to the ethics committee and access to the national competent authority will be decided nationally, as well as the access within a sponsor organization. So based on the profile that the user will have, there will be possible for this user to see or not certain parts of the dossier. In particular, for the IMPD quality part, there is a specific role that has been is foreseen in the role matrix, that is a user that has access to the quality part of the IMPD. And there are other profiles that do not have access to this information. So it's then possible to combine multiple roles. This is really what Anna was explaining in the first day, and have a complete profile or more restrict profile. So this is how ctis takes into account the visibility of certain documents, in particular for the quality part. I hope this clarifies.
Thank you very much, Laura. I think very comprehensive response on this question, knowing that there is much more to be said about this and about the roles and permissions in ctis. Now, there is, again, a fundamental question, I think, about the scope of use of ctis, and I will put that to Stephanie, I think, this time. Will ctis be used also for medical devices?
No, normally not. For medical devices, normally there is a new regulation that is also upcoming, and normally in the following months will be fully applicable. But I heard that there is a specific portal for medical devices as well. I don't know, Fatima, if you want also to add something about that, maybe?
Yes, yes, indeed, it's completely true what Stephanie already said. What I would like to explain is that at this moment, you may have products that they have medical devices. And we need to look at the product and see what is the purpose of the product. It's the product, the IMP, the test, which is under investigation, or we are looking at the medical device. So you need to look at this in a regulatory perspective. If the combination, it's the purpose, it's a product, it's a medicinal product, then it should follow the regulation of the clinical trials with medicinal products. And we have a section in our system where we ask the sponsor, or where the sponsor needs to provide information about if that specific product involves medical devices, and if these medical devices, they have CA marked. So, but our system, it's really for medicinal products, but they can include medical devices, but not for the investigation of specific medical devices. These will follow in another regulation, as Stephanie was explaining.
Okay, thank you very much, Fatima. We will start drawing to a close, but there is a couple of last questions that I will pick up from the chat directly. So we have a question about the draft assessment report. Will the sponsor also receive the draft assessment report prepared by the reporting member states and circulated to all member states? Can I place that question perhaps with Fatima?
No, the sponsor will not receive the draft assessment report. The sponsor will receive an RFI, which is a set of considerations that is asked for the member states. But what the sponsor and all the public can see at the approval of the trial in the public registry, it's the final assessment report. But the draft assessment report, it's a communication tool between member states. So only will receive the set of questions that were consolidated by the involved member states.
Thank you, Fatima. Laura, there is a question with interest concerning GDPR. So the question is, where could we find the transparency rules mentioned in relationship to the GDPR concerns over the publication of Investigator? Where could they find these rules, please?
It's on the public website. It's on the EMA corporate website. Where is also available the material, all the material available in relation to ctis. So I don't know if the slide then will be accessible. There is actually an hyperlink in the presentation that I gave on the transparency. I know the material will be made available to the public, but there you can see the complete name of the file, and there is an hyperlink. I don't know if the audience can have access to the PPT and download it, or just visually, but in any case, in the slide, you have the details of the name of the file.
Thank you very much, Laura. And the last question, Laura, I will also place with you, which is about the upload of active substance master files from manufacturers. Will manufacturers need to register with EMA also for this purpose? Is it a question we can answer?
There is no such a concept of manufacturing registering as such in ctis. The user from the sponsor side will have access to ctis, and then they can give different profiles to manage the clinical trial. And there is a specific role that was mentioned before that is in relation to the quality part. Any additional, so the IMPD Q viewer and preparer, but any additional documents, I mean, the documents that are required in the dossier are the ones defined in the regulation based on the Annex 1. And so this is the list of documents that needs to be provided. And based on this, we have created Idoneo's profile of users that can have access and provide this documentation or view it.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you very much to our speakers and panelists of the day. We are, just before we are closing, we are going to give you a little bit of technical information concerning the training program again, as last time, so that you know and get the answers to the many questions that you've placed as to where are the materials, can we have the materials, can we have the video clips, and so on. So I will give the word to Barbara Sajek, who is our trainee with EMA at the moment, and who has been the strong backbone of this event, both on the 22nd of February and today. So she has been coordinating and organizing together with a team of colleagues. Barbara joined us in the autumn and will stay us for a bit of time. She has a recent graduation in science, so she's a Master of Science in Neurobiology from the University of Aberdeen. So Barbara, could you give us a little overview of where materials can be found and what the principles are, and then a little bit of the next steps, the evaluation survey, and then after that I will still draw to a close. Barbara, please.
Okay, hello, I'm Barbara, and I will tell you more about where you can find information about the topics that you've heard today. So our CTIS training is based on online presence for all audiences and all user groups, because we would like to enable self-study. So the training materials that are available are frequently asked questions, instructor guides, quick guides, infographics, e-learning materials, additional support documents, and videos for selected modules and functionalities. And all of these can be found. So all of these are organized in a catalog in different modules. So we have introductory modules, which give you an introduction to clinical trials regulation and CTIS. Then we have specific modules targeted at member states, modules targeted at sponsors, and then modules that are common both for member states and sponsors. And we also have other audience-specific modules, such as, for example, the introduction to CTIS for public users. And if you notice, in the modules targeted for sponsors, there is also a module dedicated to SMEs and academia, which is still in development. So all of this can be found on our dedicated training program webpage, which can be accessed through the link in the bottom of the slide or through scanning the QR code in the right corner. And as Laura mentioned before, all the slides that have been presented today also have hyperlinks in them. And if you click on them, they will lead you to the dedicated place in the training website where you can actually learn more about the topics presented. So apart from this kind of training events as today, we also have a complementary master trainers program dedicated to member states and the pharmaceutical industry. And the master trainers basically help us disseminate the training materials and knowledge to their peers in their organizations to help us cater to the high volume of users within their organizations. For SMEs and academia, we largely have a focus on the online self-serving materials, and we also have dedicated training materials such as this, but there are no specific master trainers. And when using our training materials, please make note of this disclaimer, which is at the beginning of the materials. So thank you very much for attending the webinar. I can confirm that both the event on the 22nd of February and today on the 4th of March, both events are recorded, and they will be published together with the presentations that you've seen today on the EMA website. So the materials for day 1 can be found on the first link, and materials for day 2 can be found on second link. And I can tell you that the presentations have already been published. So if you would like to go back to the presentations, look at them again, and maybe follow the hyperlinks as mentioned before, you can do so already. And the recordings will follow and will be published once further editing is made. So we really value your feedback, and we will shortly send you an evaluation survey by email. So please give us your feedback, be it positive or negative. We would like to hear it so that we can make future events like this better for you and more catered to your needs. And if you have any questions, you can email us on ct.sponsortraining@ema.europa.eu, and we will answer as soon as we can. And finally, you can scan a slightly bigger version of the QR code in the right corner, and it will take you to the training website that you can see on the bottom of the page as well. And that is all from me.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And then what remains for me is just a few closing remarks, and that's, of course, adding to the thank yous. So I would like to thank very much, of course, our speakers, our other contributors. There are colleagues who have put together the video clips that you have seen, and they have been working very hard to make these available. And I also would like to thank Barbara and the rest of the team for organizing this event. And of course, I would like to thank the fellow chairs of both today and the 22nd of February. And moreover, of course, all the participants, all of you who expressed interest in this event and wanted to take part. So please do make use of the materials that we have made available for you, including the recording of this one, while we continue to finalize CTIS so that we can place that in your hands and you can start using it in due course. As Barbara mentioned, we are available, approachable in the case you have questions to us. And please do send us suggestions as well, if necessary. So with final greetings from the CTIS Accountable Executive Fergus Sweeney, who couldn't be with us today. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Thank you. Goodbye.